Now. Kia ora, Yasmin. We've got you here for People for Palestine. It's great to have you here submitting for this subcommittee of the Justice Select Committee. We've set aside 10 minutes for you, so without further ado, I'll hand straight over to you. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe to the chair, tēnā koutou katoa to the committee. Nā mihi nui ki a koutou, thank you for your time today. My name is Chloe Lundy Hodge, and with me today is Yasmin Sirhan. We are here today representing People for Palestine, a group of organisers and advocates across the motu who are focused on educating the people of Aotearoa on the cause for Palestinian liberation from the racist and violent ideology of Zionism. We recognise that peaceful, powerful resistance to injustice and ongoing colonialism is our necessary duty, and so today we submit in opposition to the Treaty Principles Bill in solidarity with tangata whenua and tangata tiriti. We also want to formally acknowledge and tautoko the submission of our Justice for Palestine whānau. He hono tangata e kore e motu, ka pā he taura waka e motu. We affirm that Māori did not cede sovereignty at the signing of Te Tiriti. Therefore, People for Palestine stands against any questioning of or any changes being made to Te Tiriti without the consultation and consent of Māori. We are especially concerned when those changes are being done in the name of so-called equality, but are really actually running cover for the removal of the protections that Te Tiriti provides for the resources of our whenua and waters. We stand for the protection of ki uta ki tai, which Te Tiriti o Waitangi leads us in.
Assalamu alaikum, tēnā koutou katoa. Today I will share my story as a Palestinian living in Aotearoa and the intertwined aspirations Māori and the Palestinian people have for tino rangatiratanga and mana motuhake. During the Nakba in 1948, my family were ethnically cleansed from their homeland and forcibly displaced by Zionist paramilitaries so they could bring in European settlers to form the State of Israel. Just like here in Aotearoa, the British and other imperialist states facilitated and funded this colonial violence through non-consulted declarations, extreme breaches of international law, and endless financial aid for warfare. You will know that this extreme colonial violence is still occurring today, and we are now in month 16 of the livestream genocide ongoing on my people by the State of Israel. My family has not yet been granted the right to return, and I have never been able to touch the soil of my homeland. Palestinians have paid the ultimate price of colonial governments making declarations in our name without any legitimate form of consultation or concern for our human rights. As proud tangata tiriti here in Aotearoa, we refuse to let these wrongs be replicated on the Indigenous peoples of this whenua. I carry the painful history with me and of my people with me today because I see the connections between the racist ideology of Zionism and the racist and harmful intentions of the Treaty Principles Bill. The main cheerleader of the bill is a Zionist sympathizer and a genocide denier who has connections to far-right networks and organizations that fund and provide social cover for Israel's decades of human rights abuses. We as a group can see that this bill is yet another endeavor by this colonial coalition to create their own whitewash definition of equity and to force assimilation on Māori and erase their Indigenous identity, just as Zionists have tried to do to us, the Palestinian people. But we know as Indigenous peoples that our power is in our mutual solidarity, collective memory, and our understanding of colonization, and we will never give up fighting for what is ours and what belongs to Indigenous peoples. Today, I also want to touch on our protection to have the religious and spiritual freedom to practice Islam in Aotearoa, which Te Tiriti provides the framework and example for. Of course, I'm speaking to Article 4 of Te Tiriti, Wairuatanga. A lot of the disingenuous conversation about this bill is equity. But what is more equitable than tupuna Māori having the foresight of knowing that other nations would be coming here and ensuring that they are free to practice their own ways of faith and spirituality? We, People for Palestine, believe that this is a strong and lasting example of how Te Tiriti protects us and gives us the holistic framework to live together on this whenua. One of our foundational values within the Palestinian movement for liberation is the indivisibility of our cause, meaning that we work to bring justice to all Palestinians, whether we are living in occupied Palestine or in the diaspora, like myself. I draw on this value of kotahitanga because we know that our struggle for liberation is interconnected with the liberation of all Indigenous peoples. Our mana motuhake is incomplete without Māori having theirs in full. So as long as my whānau resides on this whenua, before we return to our own, we stand united with tangata whenua in their fight for tino rangatiratanga. We call on this committee to throw this bill out and instead recommend the implementation of the values of Mātiki Mai for the transformation of the current state for the benefit of all and to truly honour Te Tiriti. Mai te awa ki te moana.
Koe tū Te Tiriti.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you for that. I see Steve Abel has a question. But,
Kia ora, thank you both very much, and thank you for sharing your lived experience of being Palestinians fighting for justice in your land. I think one thing that's been very striking for us understanding what settler colonialism is that we've had this real-time example in its most atrocious version with the genocide that you referred to that's been gone on. And it gives us insight to what settler colonization looks like right now. It's an ongoing process. It's founded in the same principles of assimilation and denial of Indigenous rights that all of the colonizations are founded in. So absolutely tōko your drawing of the links there. And I just want to say, imagine had those who wish to set up a state of Israel, imagine had they actually started with a conversation with the Indigenous people of Palestine and considered a treaty of agreement rather than a declaration of terra nullius via in the Balfour Declaration. Imagine had they said, let's go and have a conversation with the Indigenous people of Palestine about whether there's a place for those escaping the horrors of Europe in the 40s, but also before then, the Jews that were persecuted and had atrocities committed against them by Europeans. Imagine if that had happened instead of what we saw over the last many decades since the Nakba.
Aye.
Kia ora. And we believe that actually the Select Committee have a real opportunity to push for that to happen here, for us to have genuine meetings with Māori, to have genuine consideration of all human rights in this, and not acting on behalf of a group without their consent.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chloe and Yasmin, for your submission. It's really appreciated. Thank you for your written submission as well. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Free Palestine.
Members, we're just waiting for the next submitter to come online. So just, it might be a couple of minutes, members, so if you want to, go and stretch your legs and keep an eye on your screens, the clerk will let me know as soon as that's the case. Oh, I see. I spoke to you soon, my friends. So we've got Maia and Nathan ready to go. All right. Kia ora, Maia. Thanks for coming here today. We've got you for 5 minutes to submit on the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill. In the interest of time, I'll hand straight over to you. Kia ora.
Ai, tēnā koe, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Me tuku atau taku whakapapa ki a koutou, Maia Nathan taku ingoa, e uri au no Te Pauri. Ko aku tupuna e haina i Te Tiriti, ko plana i ngauruhe e te tai, me wiki tai timu, nā reire, I reira oku tupuna I te wai haina tia te tiriti te tautai mana warurau whātekau. Nā re mi ana kia koutou katoa. Tuatai, me korore I ana te korore mo tēnei mea te mana motuhake. I raro I te tiriti, ki hai wa mātou tupuna, I te wai haina rātou I te tiri, ki hai I tuku, I tō rātou mana motuhake, ki hai I tuku, I tō rātou tino rangatiratanga. Ki raro I te krauna, ki raro I Queenie Wikitoria, ākoa ki raro I Awai. E pupuri me taku whakapae, e mānau, e pupuri tonu ana mātou tiwi Māori I te mana motuhake o tēnei whenua mātua o Aotearoa. Nā koia tērā ko te tai o ngā mea. Tuatai, tuarua, o ku tupuna I haina I te tiriti, I haina I ngā kupu. Ki hai rātou I haina I tēnei mea te mātāpono. Tēnei mea te mātāpono e pēnei ana te tai āhuatanga e rere ana I te hou. Ne? Nā reira, e mana ana te kupu, e mana ana ngā kōrero, koe I haina tia e o ku tupuna, ngā tupuna Māori, ngā rangatira Māori I haina I te kupu. Nā reira, tuatu tērā, warawara te matu, ko taku tono I tēnei rā, ko te whakahe ahau I tēnei pire, me pēra pēr, te tīmatanga I taku tono. Tuatu tērā, I pēnei taku kōrero ki hai tuku te mana ki raro I te krauna, I te mea I te taima I te haina, I te tiriti taimano waru rau whātekau, rua mano pēr ngā hunga pake, e noho nei ki konei ki Aotearoa. Mea ka whakaro tatu mo te āhuatanga o te rahi o te iwi Māori, koni atu te waru te kau mano, tai atu te kotahi rau mano, te rahi o te iwi Māori I konei te rā taima. Nā reira, ki te ana tātou, pēhei whakaia I wā tātou rangatira, kia tuku atu te mana wa rātou taonga katoa, te whenua, te moana, ngā ngahere, ngā āhuatanga katoa, ki tērā ropu iti nei, e rua mano noiho te rahi. Nā reira, he taunakitanga tēnei, hei tāpire atu ki taku kōrero I ki hai, waku tupuna, ki hai ngā rangatira Māori haine I te tiriti, I te tuku, I tō rātou mana, ki te krauna I taua taima. Tuatu tērā, ko te āhuatanga, o te mana o te tiriti, e mea nei he kawenata tapu tēnei. I haina tia I waingaunui ngā rangatira, kone atu te rima rau ngā rangatira I haina, me te krauna. Nā reira tēnei pire, ko te tika me he kawenata tapu, me hoki mai anō te kāwanatanga ki te kōrero, ki te iwi Māori, ki ngā hapu, ki ngā iwi, he pēhea nei wā mātou whakaro. Mo te āhua o te pire nei, I mua te tukunga tu I tēnei pire ki mua I te aroro. Nā reira, koea tērā tatai āhuatanga anō, e whakahea nau I te āhuatanga o tēnei pire. Ki hai, te kāwanatanga I hoki mai ki te iwi Māori, ki te ki mai, ki te pātai mai ki a mātou, pēha pū a mātou whakaro. Nā reira, tuatu tērā, me korea mo te whakaputanga. Ko te whakaputanga, he oati. He oati e kia nei, ke konei mātou tiwi Māori, he rangatira mātou, no mātou te whenua, no mātou tēnei au e noho nei mātou. Nā ka tuhia e rātou tērā he whakau I te mana ko oti ke e ngā mātou tūpuna te tuku mai ki a rātou. Mai rano, ko roke o ku tūpuna e noho nei ki roto Aotearoa I ngā rautau ki muri. Taino mai ki te tautai mono warurau toru te kau mārima. Nā ko taku tupuna o te upauri te tai, nā ko te mahi anō tana ingoa. I haina I te wakaputanga, I haina I te wakaputanga I te tautai mono warurau toru te kau mārima. Nā reira, ko te tuakana tērā, tuatu tērā ko te teina, nā ka puta ko te tiriti e kōrero nei a tātou I tēnei wā. Tahirau waru mano, tai mano warurau whātekau. Nā reira, mea nau, e whakapai ana te ropu act, e mea nā rātou, e āhei te katoa ngā iwi e noho nei ki Aotearoa, ki te takamai ki raro I tēnei kupu te tino rangatiratanga, ka hore au te whakai ki tērā. Tino rangatiratanga, he kupu tērā e whakaū ana I te mana o a tātou rangatira, I haina I te tiriti I tērā taima. Ko te wāanga ki te taha ki a tauiwima ki te krauna, ko te taha ki tēnei kupu ko te kāwanatanga. Nā ko te kāwanatanga, tērā huatanga, e mea nei rātou e āhei te krauna te tiaki wa rātou ake iwi, e noho nei ki Aotearoa, ko rātou nahe. Nā, me te whakaū tonu, te mana motuhake o tēnei whenua kia
we're pretty much out of time, so I'm going to ask you just to wind up.
Kia ora. Marama nau te āhuatanga o tēnei āhua, lea ko homai nei ki au te 5 miniti. Me taku āhua āwangawanga mo tēnā. Wetai tāngata ko hoatungia te tekau. Hakapai anau te rāpena te mea kei roto waku korero I te reo. Ko karapopoto hia te wahanga ki au, ka ale te rei te tika I taku mo. E hoi eno. Ana te āwangawanga, nā rea mi ana kia koutou katoa e ngā memo o te komiti nei, e hoi taimai nā ki āhei au ki te whakaputai o kukakaro. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora. Thank you, Maia. Just to assure you that the 5 minutes isn't because you've spoken to Reo, and I certainly want to applaud you for taking the opportunity to speak in the language of your choice. The reason is because you were selected randomly, and you're given that choice, and so we gave you 5 minutes as an individual submitter. But thank you for your reo and your korero. It's really appreciated. So thank you for that. Members, we've got a submitter now called Te Kapu o Te Wai Taha, and I've got Ebony Duff here. It doesn't appear on the agenda. There's been a slight mix-up, but we're accommodating her now because we have the ability to do so. Ebony, I'll just hand straight over to you. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. Aroha mai. I'm using Ebony's computer, but I'm actually Arita Gray. I'm the chair of Te Kapu o Waitaha. So tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to our submission. I don't intend to speak a lot. I'm happy to just be reiterating a few things and then answering any questions that you might have. So Waitaha, we are an iwi in Te Poke, the Bay of Plenty. We settled in 2013. So Te Kapu o Waitaha is the post-settlement governance entity for Waitaha. As we set out in our submission, we oppose the bill. What we would prefer that the Crown does is actually listen to the Waitangi Tribunal. Their findings in ngā matapono we support. But I would like to take this opportunity to just confirm that we absolutely tautoko all those who have spoken about this bill invoking significant constitutional change without consultation with its partner, Māori. Secondly, I'd like to reiterate that the principles of the bill do not reflect in any way the intent or the words in Te Tiriti. So for us, I'm going to go so far as to say it is an abomination, but worse, it's taking me back to 1877. So I'm sure you are all aware of the Wiparata and Bishop of Wellington case, where Justice Prendergast basically stated that the treaty was a nullity because the process that has been undertaken for this bill has completely disregarded the Māori as partner and is seeking to make unilateral changes to Te Tiriti. The third point I want to make is that The second principle is disingenuous by supposedly granting Māori the right to have different rights through our treaty settlements, because our treaty settlements were never meant to supersede Te Tiriti. Our treaty settlements are supposed to be complementary to the articles of Te Tiriti. So that is why in our submission, we absolutely oppose this bill and seek that it is actually abandoned. That's all I need to say, I think, because I'm succinct. And I'd just like to open it up to any questions that you might have.
Kia ora, thank you very much for that. You'll appreciate you're reiterating a submission that we've heard from a number of different submitters over the past few days. I see Steve Abel has a question, so we'll go to him.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your submission. Thank you very much. I wonder if you could talk about whether you think the principles, as are currently understood, partnership and participation and protection and redress and so forth, are a useful step in our full embodiment of tino rangatiratanga as is guaranteed in the treaty. The existing principles, I mean, I don't mean the attempt to abrogate them and nullify tino rangatiratanga as the current bill does.
Yeah, so you're talking about partnership, good faith, active
Yes.
protection.
Yes.
They are certainly a step on the way to our partnership. But again, those principles have been the result of many years of cases before the courts, and they're an attempt by our Court of Appeal to try and reconcile, I guess, the English and the te reo versions of Te Tiriti. So that's why I say they're a good step.
A compromise, but a good step.
Exactly. And so from our point of view, as the tribunal sets out in their recommendations, there actually has to be a conversation between Māori and the Crown as to what the principles should actually be and how we will move forward in the future. That's my view anyway. Yeah.
Thank you.
Kia ora, I see Hana Rafiti Mike Clark has a question.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Chair. Tira tēnā rā koe. Thank you for your submission. I just wanted to kind of extend on the fact that when your kōrero about treaty settlements were after the fact of what had happened to us, and some of the submitters that have had the opportunity to talk have said that was something, treaty settlements are almost like a favour or a privilege to have, yet we didn't actually ask. So yeah, maybe a little bit hard to articulate that question, but can you just elaborate a little bit more how the treaty settlements were after the fact of raupatu happening to us? It wasn't like it was in the treaty.
Oh, kia ora, Hana. Treaty settlements for us were actually a good opportunity, but it involved a lot of compromise. So for Waitaha, the raupatu, what was done to our tūpuna hakaraia, marginalised Waitaha. So for over a century, our people didn't even identify as Waitaha because we had basically been left with 1,500 acres after the raupatu and after the sale of the Kapuke block here. What the settlement did for us was gave us the opportunity to become known not only to the Crown, but also to our own people. There's been a real resurgence, and for that I'm grateful. But at the end of the day, the treaty settlements are a mechanism by which the Crown gets to think that they've provided redress for what was taken. But we all know that the treaty settlements, we would have probably obtained about 1% of that which was lost. So again, treaty settlements for me, yes, it was an opportunity for us because our settlement was worth about $15 million. And thanks to us being able to manage our own assets, we're up to about 42 million as of last year, which means that we can become responsible. Not to say that the Crown isn't too, under Te Tiriti, but we can become responsible for our own path and our own people. But ultimately, yes, the treaty settlements are only a step.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Steve, did you have another question there, just quickly?
Yeah, if there's time, is what you just said then, that response, isn't that exactly what this is all about? Is Māori seeking pathways to self-determination and autonomy that was denied and stolen and through the Raupatu and through the colonization, and isn't it so surprising that people don't want to see that autonomy and that self-determination? What is the fear, and why should people want to deny that to you, is my feeling about it. I wonder if you can reflect.
I am surprised, absolutely, that people don't think the same way. Oh, some people don't think the same way. I actually am really heartened by some of the submissions that I've heard to date. And I'm optimistically heartened by what I've heard too. So the fact that we had 300,000 submissions on this bill gives me heart for sure. But I also was shocked when I heard a submitter talk about equity. I'm not quite sure how you could think equity was a bad thing, but from this submitter's point of view, he was thinking, well, why should I, how he seemed to be thinking about it was equity means that I am actually handicapped, instead of how I see it, which is equity means that someone else is able to be lifted up so that they can achieve what others can. Exactly. And so that's why this co-design of a collaborative process needs to take place, because there needs to be a proper and frank discussion, because we do have different views. And I don't understand his view. He clearly doesn't understand my view, but possibly through the proper process, we may be able to understand each other and, as you say, create better pathways.
Thank you for that. We're going to leave it there. We're out of time.
Indeed.
Thank you very much. Ka pai.
No, thank you. Ka kite koutou.
Ka kite. Members, I think our next submitter is Ripeka Lessels. Ripeka Lessels. Kia ora, Ripeka. Welcome to this subcommittee of the Justice Select Committee. We've set aside 10 minutes for your submission. In the interest of time, I'll hand straight over to you. Kia ora.
Kia ora wāti kia koe e te rana tira nau nei rā tēnei rōpū ai whakahaere tēnei rani. Tēnei rā te mihi atu rā kia koe to katoa noho mai nā e te huna, mātakitaki e te huna whakarongo i tēnei rani. I am of Ngāi Tūhoi Ngāti Awa, Te Arawa Ngāti Tūwhare Toa descent. I grew up listening to my mother's stories of being traumatized by teachers beating her for speaking the only language she knew as a child, Te Reo Māori. I'm grateful that the system did not beat it entirely out of her, and that might be because, in her words, I panaia hau I te tau tuawhitu. She was sacked at standard 5. I'm grateful that her parents and her home life nurtured Te Reo Māori with all its customs and rituals in all other fabrics of her community. And I'm grateful that my parents raised me to speak Te Reo Māori also. I'm choosing to speak in English to you today so that there is no ambiguity in what I have to say. I've asked myself over the time that this bill was given oxygen, how did we get here? And why am I having such an allergic reaction to this bill? As outlined in my submission, some of my thoughts are expressed succinctly, as I've been able to make them, but really all culminating in my belief that the author of this bill thinks that his ancestors and my ancestors didn't really know what they were doing, and they got it wrong 185 years ago. I think not. I believe he fails to realise a simple fact about the Treaty of Waitangi. Yep, it was a partnership. And although the word partner is not actually written in the Treaty of Waitangi, the reality of it is, how can you have a contractual agreement with someone and expect that you would not need to partner with them to fulfill that agreement? Such a ridiculous assertion. The principle one in this particular bill is about giving the government power to govern and to make laws and ultimately to maintain democracy. While democracy is not a new concept, it continually undermines the minority. He who has the numbers has the power. As I grew up, I came to understand that I was the minority. So we will be forever outnumbered until possibly my great-great-grandchildren are here. Principle 2, we were guaranteed tino rangatiratanga over our taonga, which includes the right to self-determination and protection. What I believe this bill does is it reduces the original intent of the guarantee to a treaty settlement. Had current and successive governments honoured their obligations and responsibilities to the Treaty of Waitangi, we may not have treaty settlements today. I believe that irrespective of whether hapu or iwi have settled or not, they are still guaranteed tino rangatiratanga over their taonga. I reiterate that the proposed principles eliminates any recognition of Māori as tangata whenua, iwi taketake, focusing instead on individual rights for all New Zealanders. I believe that this ignores the historical context and the recent understandings which tell us that Māori have sovereignty over their land, resources and their taonga, which they did not cede. When I think of how my tipuna demonstrated their tino rangatiratanga, their mana motuhake tanga, I think of my great-great-grandmother Te Raiwhara, alongside several other tūhoi kuia who were sent to Mount Eden prison for exercising their right to their tino rangatiratanga by pulling out the Pākehā surveyor pegs on their land in the Ruatoki. I remember my great-great-grandfather Tamarau Waiari, who repeatedly wrote to the land commissioning agent of the day to return his land that was incorrectly confiscated, and being told that he must prove continual occupation on that land. He did that, but still the land was not returned. Every Māori that I know has a story similar to this, that tells about how our people practiced or tried to practice their tino rangatiratanga. The third principle, everyone is equal before the law and is entitled to equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination. You know, in 2025, I don't even know what that means, and I'm an educator. But the principle assumes that everyone is equal and alike, should be treated alike in all aspects. However, equal treatment does not mean or ensure equal outcomes, as highlighted by the Human Rights Commission, who said, formal equality is not equal treatment before the law. It reflects the Aristotelian notion that to ensure consistent treatment, like should be treated alike. However, equal treatment does not always ensure equal outcomes. Because past or ongoing discrimination can mean that equal treatment simply reinforces existing inequalities. To achieve substantive equality, that is equality of outcomes, some groups will need to be treated differently. It follows that not all different treatment will be considered discrimination. Now, wouldn't it be lovely if we were all equal under the law? No more profiling of Māori children walking down the street. No more discrimination by virtue of association. No rejected rental properties because you're brown. But sadly, we are. And I am one of those Māori that happen to have a Pākehā name, Ripeka, Lessels. When booking accommodation online, no one suspects I am Māori until I arrive to pick up the key. And I can tell you that we are not treated equal. Māori are more likely to be incarcerated or sent to the Privileges Committee for menial things than non-Māori, as in the case of Tākuta, Ferris and Hana, and the Haka, and then David Seymour driving up the Parliament steps on a Land Rover. Discrimination, unequal. According to the Stats New Zealand, we have over 140,000 children that live with material hardship and over 60,000 that live in serious material hardship. And tamariki Māori feature high on these statistics. And I believe that this means Māori have to stand on their tippy toes to even reach the bottom rung of the equality ladder. This bill does not allow equity as a means to ensure equal outcomes. I do not support the principle of the Treaty Waitangi Bill, as it is not a fair representation of the intent of the Treaty of Waitangi. A core intention of the Treaty of Waitangi was to protect Māori rights, including land ownership, including resources, taonga, as well as the right to exercise self-determination. The rights of Māori tangata whenua iwi take are a part of our identity, our culture, and our way of life. Removing or limiting these rights disrespects this intrinsic connection we have to the land and undermines our ability as Māori to care for and to protect our taonga in accordance with our customary practices. And this bill undermines that protective role. Kia ora rawatsu.
Kia ora, thank you for that. Members, we've got a little bit of time left if someone has a question. No, look, that's fine. No, I see Rema Nakle's got a question. We'll go to her.
Kia ora whaia. Look, thank you for sharing some of that history. And although my question doesn't pertain particularly to the bill that we're discussing, did you say that your mother, your beloved mother, that she ended up being expelled from school? Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Or continuing to, was
it?
Mm.
Well, yes, because she couldn't speak English. And they repeatedly beat her because she couldn't speak English. And so she never learned to really speak English at all. And was expelled from school at standard, well, we call it, I think it's called year 6 now, but it was called standard 5 back then.
Okay, thank you for that.
Kia ora, Ripeka. Thank you for your submission and the stories you tell. It's really useful to us. And thank you for your written submission too. Ka pai.
Kia ora rawatu. Hei konara.
Kia ora.
Thank you. Members, we're going backwards. I think it's Maia to Hira has found your way here, and here she is. Kia ora, Maia. We've got you for 5 minutes. So thanks for coming to
Kia ora. Kia ora.
Kia ora, you cut out for a bit, Duncan.
of the Treaty Principles Bill. I'll hand.
Kia ora, can you hear me?
Sorry, Maia, it's probably my internet connection. Straight over to you.
Tapai, tēnā koe. O tira tēnā koutou ngā mema pāremata o tēnei komite mihi ana kia koutou o tira ki ngā kaituku tāpaitanga I tēnei o ngā rā, o tira ngā rā kua pahuri ake nei. Ko Maia te Hira tōku ingoa he roia Māori ahau e mahi ana ai roto I ngā mahi Te Tiriti o tira ngā mahi o te Aotearoa. E whakahe marika ana hau ki tēnei pire. Whakahe pautikaha ana hau ki tēnei pire. I vehemently oppose this bill and I adopt and support the many brilliant submissions that others with the same position have made to the Select Committee. My submission has been taken as read, but I'd just like to emphasise a couple of points that I did make in my submission. The first is that this bill is, for many of us who grew up with an advanced education on Te Tiriti o Waitangi and its matters, it feels like a personal attack. And I say that not just in terms of my current working life, but also because my children and I descend from at least 4 signatories to Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Through me, my children descend from Te Huhu and Pāpāhia, as well as William Hobson, and through their father, they descend from Pōmari. And so for that reason alone, I think it's disingenuous, I think it's disrespectful, and I think it's disgraceful, in fact, that a minor party is able to conduct such harm inflicted upon those of us who have a very intimate relationship with Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And I would like to raise that in other jurisdictions, such a reality I don't think would ever happen. It would be very odd in somewhere like the UK for a minor party to get away with making amendments or altering the Magna Carta. A similar thing would be very, very odd, in fact unacceptable in a country like the United States for a minor party to get away with treating the constitution of that country in such a way. And so I am baffled as to why the ACT Party has been allowed to progress with the proposals to alter Te Tiriti o Waitangi the way that it has. And for many Māori and non-Māori, I think that this feels like an abusive process for us to be held at ransom here in the Select Committee and to be forced to participate in a conversation about Te Tiriti o Waitangi that has not, as the Waitangi Tribunal found in the Ngā Tāpuna report, at all been effective of an appropriate process. And I also think that for us to be here today it's quite embarrassing. I think it's not something that I wish I was doing today, but I understand that we are being forced to participate in this process because we are left to defend ourselves against, as I said earlier, what feels like a personal attack. And so that's where I'm coming from today. I didn't want to get into any of the legalese because I feel as though many of the submissions that the Select Committee has already heard have done a wonderful job at giving you the legal analysis of this entire process as well as the bill. And so those are the points that I wanted to highlight.
Kia ora, Maia, thank you for that. I think that personal voice is really important too. I'm going to go to Hana Rafiti Maipi Clark for a question.
Tēnā koe. O tira tēnā koe te rangatira e Maia ka nui aku whakamiharo ki te whakarongo ki a koe me o kōrero, not only in your professional job as a lawyer, but as a mama and also as a rangatahi Māori as a wahine, so I'm truly inspired by that. Just wanted to make comment. And also just, if you could just quickly extend on how you were making references to different international countries, that it would be odd if not unacceptable to mess with some, for instance, United States and the United States, like their constitution, and how a minor party, bearing in mind that they're not even on the submissions at the moment out of all the parties, to be able to do something like that.
Tēnā anō ki koe te rangatira e hana. Ai, hei wāhi kōrero mō tērā tu āhuatanga rereke nei. I think that Te Tiriti o Waitangi, as you've already heard throughout this process, is tapu. And I don't want to, give our values or our philosophies to those other jurisdictions. I don't want to impose things like tapu on those other jurisdictions, but he mana nui tō e rā kawenata ki e rā o ngā wāhi. And so for those places to hold such documents, constitutionally significant documents with such mana, we too should be doing the same thing for Te Tiriti. If not to that level, then close to it. I think it's, really important.
Maia, we're pretty much out of time there, so we better get on to our next submitter. But thanks for coming along, and thanks for your written submission as well. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou.
Members, our next submitter is Catherine Delahunty, and we have her for 10 minutes. Kia ora, Catherine, I can see you there. Welcome to the Justice Select Committee, or the subcommittee thereof. I won't waste any time, and I'll hand straight over to you for 10 minutes. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. I know what you're going through. I've spent 9 years on the select committees, and it's very challenging. So I'm going to try and speak from the guts of the matter so that you can stay awake with the many, many submissions. I just want to acknowledge the last two that I just heard, Ripeka and Maia, because I was teaching Te Tiriti till 1 o'clock, and now I'm here, fresh from that experience, which shows how little many well-meaning citizens know about this topic. It's frightening. So kia ora everybody, I've got 4 main points, but I'll just let you know who I am. I was in Parliament for 9 years as an MP, but that was only a tiny part of my life. A lot of my life has been in community. I've been teaching Te Tiriti and learning about Te Tiriti for 35 years. And I've just come back from Waitangi for the 22nd year in a row where I've gone to sit and listen and learn. And my favourite submission on this bill was actually when Hana ripped it apart in the House. That's where it should have stopped. That should have been the end of this, because honestly, like the young wahine just said, it's embarrassing that this is called a national conversation by Mr. Seymour. Select Committee gives 5 minutes or 10 minutes for the most important constitutional issue that this country has, and tangata whenua are forced to defend a position. It's actually unacceptable. This, my first point is about this. Te Tiriti was signed between the Crown and Rangatira. Where is the conversation between the Crown and Rangatira over this? It's not happening. It's happening within the Kāwanatanga sphere. That is not right, and I'm sure you know that and have very little choice about that because that's where you're functioning. But it is actually not okay to exclude the other party. If it was an international treaty, which it is, how come the other party's been excluded? The Westminster system has excluded the voices of the people who actually signed Te Tiriti. And many, many people who submitted, of the hundreds of thousands, won't get heard. I'm very privileged to get heard. And I can't even remember which of my submissions got me through the gate. But I appreciate being here because I did a number for a number of groups, because I'm part of many groups. I did a number, and I'm grateful for that time. But actually, you guys, it's not your decision. This is not your decision. That's my first point. The second one I just want to touch on, because I am freshly inspired by Waitangi. I heard a wonderful kōrero there from Annette Sykes, who knows more than possibly any of us about constitutional treaty issues due to working in that space. Rangatiratanga was never ceded. So I'm not going to bother with what the Akpare put up. You know what they put up. It's not about art. It's not about principles. It's actually an attack on the articles. That is super clear. Let's be honest about that and stop mucking around. It's an attack on the articles. So Article 1 of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Te Tiriti, there's not a whole lot of versions, there's various renditions, and then there's Te Tiriti, is very clear about limited governance, okay? You know that, don't you? Like, everyone knows that Kāwanatanga was limited governor, not government. It wasn't the same as giving away the power of, why would these people give their power away? There is absolutely no reason why they would. And they didn't. So when you look at the words of Te Tiriti in Article 1, limited governance, Kāwanatanga, Article 2 has the word tino before the word rangatiratanga. It's not tino, Kāwanatanga, that would be absolute crown authority, right? That's not in Te Tiriti. It's tino, rangatiratanga, and that's the point Annette made at Waitangi. So absolute rangatiratanga. One of them is an absolute, one is a qualified, agreed, which comes from he whakaputanga. If you know about this, then you know about why it's a limited governance that was allowed. Okay. So just think about the word tino, absolute authority. That has not been ceded. My next point is about Article 3. So all the stuff about equality, i.e. sameness, it's kind of embarrassing when I just listening to Ripeka's story about her mother and the pain that goes with those stories, to think that we're actually saying that we have equality under law now, because we clearly don't. And we haven't had, because this country was colonized based on white supremacy. And if we can't face that fact, we are not going to heal the harm that is taking place. So Article 3, equality, the word, does not appear in Te Tiriti. Article 3 is about Māori rights to British citizenship. And this is, again, this is inspired by Tina Nutt's kōrero. If Māori had ceded sovereignty, which I know some people in the Crown think they did, why would you need Article 3? Why would you need it? Why would they have to be given the rights of British citizenship? They already had them if they'd ceded sovereignty. Can we just have a little bit of consistency about this? So let's be consistent in our understanding that sovereignty was never ceded, and therefore Article 3 is a negotiated arrangement for dual citizenship that tangata whenua took as one of their gains from Te Tiriti. It's actually really, really simple. They did not sign away sovereignty. That's why they actually negotiated Article 3. So I think it's really important, like, just not to get hung up on what is being said by people who actually don't have any scholarship in this field and have no experience of it, and just keep perpetuating these false notions so that people can continue to be confused. Confusion benefits people in power. It does not benefit the debate that we should be having. My next point, I know time goes really fast, so I don't want to talk too much because I'd love it if you ask me some questions.
We've got about 3 minutes left, Catherine.
Okay, my last point is there's referendum reference in this bill. We can't have a referendum. I've just spent 35 years teaching people, and with goodwill, 90%, if not 99% of those people don't know what he whakaputanga is, cannot name the articles of Te Tiriti, and do not know anything about what happened in the land wars. And in fact, the idea of a referendum is a disgrace. It's like asking people who know nothing to vote about something they don't know, and then saying that that represents the people's will. That is a terrifying prospect. And as those of us who are educators are completely opposed to it, because we know that the knowledge about this is from talk back, not from actually learning, because we don't teach this thoroughly in this country, and people are just starting to get their head around it. We should not be voting on it. It's a ridiculous idea, and it's also a breach of Te Tiriti. So any questions? Oh, no, that's right. That's your job, Duncan.
That's my job. Look, sorry for the picture. My internet's a bit funny today, but I'll go to Steve Abel for a question.
Kia ora. Thank you, Catherine, and your long-term advocacy and your big influence on a lot of tangata Tiriti in terms of our knowledge of the treaty as well.
Kia ora.
I wonder if you perceive this in the span of history as sort of a blip where we see a new level of galvanization across tangata whenua and tangata Tiriti to push towards genuine constitutional transformation where we actually uphold Te Tiriti, we actually learn about our history, we actually embody or allow tino rangatiratanga to be fully embodied by iwi Māori. And is that trajectory sort of unstoppable, and this is just a blip, a moment in time?
Yeah, great pata. I actually think it's unstoppable, but that does not mean there are going to be problems along the way, because this is a backlash situation. It's a fear-based backlash which is being manipulated. I don't think it's stoppable, because I think the tangata whenua, not just here but all over the planet, the indigenous people of this planet are unstoppable, and they offer so much to us, particularly for survival of the planet. So I'm really, really grateful that I feel it's unstoppable, but I'm really, really ashamed that we're having this debate, so-called, because I think it is just a step backwards into feeding on ignorance and fear and people's privilege that they don't want to share. So I agree with you. We're moving. I went on the hikoi. I've never seen so many Pākehās. I went on the hikoi in 2005, and there were so many more Pākehā and non-Māori, tangata tiriti, tauiwi, whatever words. So yeah, we're moving. We will not be stopped by this bill or any of the other bills that are attacking Te Tiriti right now. There are many other bills that do that right now, not just this one. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Catherine. And look, I think we'll leave it there, but thank you for taking the time to make a submission. Thank you for your written submission as well. Members, our next... Kia ora. Our next submitter is Robert Hamlin. We have Robert for 5 minutes. Rob's just coming online now until we get the video and audio up.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Robert. Can't see you yet.
Yeah, can't see me at the moment. And I can see you can't see me. I think it must be something at your end, because it was running until I got promoted.
Okay. Well, look, if that's the case, it might be worthwhile just getting in to the submission with audio only. We've got
Yeah, that's okay.
Yep, we've got you for 5 minutes, so I'll just hand straight over to you.
Okay, I'm happy enough to be a disembodied voice. Thank you for hearing my submission. My name is Robert Hamlin. I'm a member of the Department of Marketing at the University of Otago, but I'm giving this submission in a personal basis. I put in quite a hefty written submission, but I'd really just like to talk to one part of it, and that is the concept, and that's really all it is, of the fact that when Parliament is facing the situation that they're facing, that this bill is hoping to address, to a very great extent, they're actually facing an industry rather than a movement. Now, I've been studying business for 40 years, and obviously the law forms a framework for business, and the law comes in two parts: statute law, which is in this country set by the democratic process, and a common law, which is basically the way that the principles that are outlined in the acts that Parliament pass are applied to the individual disputations of the population. The common law is different to statute law in that it's not a democratic process. It is, in fact, a professional and intellectual process. And because it's not democratic, it also has a tendency to reflect the views of those that participate in it, who are essentially disproportionately well-to-do. Because it's non-democratic and because it tends to be distorted in its representation, generally, countries that run the common law situation make sure that the common law is well restrained by statute, that it can't go too far away from home base. Where statute fails to do that, the results can be really quite unfortunate. And probably the best example of that is what's known as the law of torts in the United States, Now, anybody who's worked with tort in the United States, and I've had that disprivilege, would be pretty much unanimous in that the law of torts in the United States in no way serves the general population of the United States. It has a Robin Hood pass line that it is giving common people access to justice, but it is an industry, and it's a big industry, and it's funded by capital out of Wall Street that employs thousands of lawyers, and effectively the overall effect of the American tort industry is to take money from the general population and hand it to the capitalists of Wall Street. That's basically the way it works. Generally, in other jurisdictions, that hasn't happened. But when the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Act was passed in 1975, the situation for a breakout of the common law was basically established. And the requirements of the treaty essentially ask the common law to do what it's not designed to do and shouldn't do, and that is establish principles on its own. The common law interprets principles and applies them, so it shouldn't and generally doesn't create them. Because it's been kind of released from the bonds of statute, the Te Tiriti tort industry has become, like tort in the United States, an industry. It employs a lot of people. It has a lot of capital deployed into it, not least by the state. 2/3 of all civil legal aid in 2023 was directed to Te Tiriti tort. It is an industry, basically a business. In a lot of respects, it's very similar to the US commercial tort. It wishes to grow, it wishes to return resources to the people who are funding it, and it also wishes to make sure that nothing interferes with it. Now, the problem with American tort is that the American government can't stop American tort because the Constitution stops it. In this country, we do have the opportunity to put this industry back in its box where I believe it belongs by passing this act. If you don't, the potential exists for the Te Tiriti tort industry in this country, like its American counterpart, to completely move beyond Parliament's control. So if we, and the last 3 submissions have been very informative in their desire to promote Te Tiriti to some form of immutable constitutional statute. If that happens, and the most likely form of that is the Supreme Court.
Robert, just letting you know you've got about 30 seconds left.
Yeah, matters move beyond your control. There is only one other country that runs its affairs according to an immutable sacralized statute that Parliament cannot alter. And that country is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, if you wish to be like Iran, then don't pass this act. If you would prefer to maintain the status quo, then do. But the choice is yours.
Kia ora, thank you very much for that, Robert, and enjoyed the medieval history in your written submission as well. So thanks for mentioning King Alfred. Not many people do. But look, thanks for your submission, and thanks for the time you spent with us.
Thank you.
Kia ora. Members, we now have the Tiangi Tribal Authority, and I see we've got Te Maira Urahe. Kia ora, welcome to the Select Committee. We've got you for 10 minutes. In the interest of time, I'll hand it straight over to you. Kia ora.
Hoi anō kia ora tātou, ko te mai ora rure he toku ingoa, he uria hau o tūhoi pōtiki, he whangai anō o tūhoringi Ngāti Wāhia. I tēnei rā, he whakakōrero ana a hau i te tāpaitanga o tūhoringi Tribal Authority, or otherwise TTA. I firstly want to express my disagreement with the previous speaker's submissions, but want to support those two before him. Firstly, Maia te Hira, as well as Ripeka Lawless, who mentioned herself as a descendant of Tamaro Waiari, which I am too. I also want to acknowledge Valentine's Day and those who are wedded to the Treaty of Waitangi, people like Moana Jackson and Ed Sykes, who have had a love affair with the Tiriti o Waitangi over the course of their careers and have created jurisprudence that has shaped the constitution of this country. I also want to acknowledge the death of Captain Cook on this day, however, so many years ago. And my last mihi is to Sir Bon Gillies, who today would have turned 100. He was the last surviving member of the 28 Māori Battalion. I want to pick up on the questions around the referendum and make reference to the Uluru Statement. So the Uluru Statement was one developed by the Torres Strait Islander people and Aboriginals of Australia. They wanted to seek representation in the parliaments of Australia, and it went to national referendum. Now, most of us know that the majority population in Australia is not Indigenous, so of course, that referendum was never going to fall in favour of the Indigenous peoples over there. Secondly, this kōrero of our tort law in America. So I was fortunate to spend 9 months completing a Masters of Environmental Law, and it was revealed that legal personality was first discussed in America. 1972, Christopher D. Stone. And obviously, us as New Zealand had taken that idea and developed it, incorporated, infused it with our own Indigenous ideas, and we get today what we call legal personality, which we have over Te Urewera, over Whanganui River, and just recently Taranaki, the Kahui Maunga collective there. I'm sitting over Whakarewarewa, and these people have been operating for more than 100 years. Started the Pink and White Terraces, where our people started the tourist industry here in New Zealand. So with that, we welcome the announcement today of Minister Tama Potaka that more than 1.2 billion has been contributed to the New Zealand economy through Māori tourism. And that has been a result of good relationships that we have formed over the years. And whilst these don't operate explicitly under Te Tiriti, they do operate implicitly under it. So our people have been able to host sovereigns from other nations. We had the Duke of Cornwall and York here back in 1901. Just on Wednesday, we had Google here. And just yesterday, we had Apple. So I want to mihi to Hana Rāwhiti, because when I discussed the Treaty Principles Bills and our submission, they instantly referred to the video of her ripping apart the Treaty Principles Bill in Pāremata. So there was a lot of education I didn't have to do because of the statements that we have been making on a global stage because of people like her. This bill is reminiscent of Wee Parata v. the Bishop of Wellington, which was a case in 1877, and the judge presiding there was Judge Prendergast. He called the treaty a simple nullity, calling the Indigenous peoples here incapable of governance and complete savages. This is reminiscent of that. So whilst not explicitly saying those things, he wants to erode the status of Te Tiriti o Waitangi so that we may not have those rights, because he still views us as savages and barbarians. And along the chronology of history, there is that 1877 case. We think of the Orewa speech by Don Brash in 2004, and this is a part of an array of bills that have been introduced into Parliament by a minority party that seek to erode the foundation of this country, which is Te Tiriti o Waitangi. The idea of future is one where we are no longer necessary to refer to the treaty. It is hoped that as a people we're able to work together and collaborate without having to fight for our rights to be recognized. At present, the treaty is our legal backstop. So if people aren't willing to collaborate, we refer to our legal rights that allow you to be here. And because we have rights that predate not only Te Tiriti, but predate Te Whakaputanga. And since the arrival of Captain Cook, there's been erosion of those rights ever since. And so that's why I mentioned we wanted to acknowledge the death of Captain Cook today. So, yeah, I just want to say that Tūhorangi Tribal Authority vehemently oppose this bill. And if you have any questions, please. Sorry, Dr. Webb, you're on mute.
Thanks, baby. You should be cheering. Kia ora, thank you for that submission. I see Steve Abel has a question, so we'll go to him.
Kia ora, thank you very much. I wanted to pick up on the point you made about the implicit facilitation that Te Tiriti allows, or sort of allows for what you described as the value of the tourism industry in your part of the world, and how that those decades of cohesion as a nation and essential peace, though there's been structural violence and that hasn't ended, but the essential peace that we enjoy is because of that implicit certainty that Te Tiriti is there as a foundation and the recognition of tino rangatiratanga. And in nations where that doesn't exist, the kind of marginalisation of Indigenous people is far worse, and the general cohesion of the nation is far worse. And I wonder if you can expand on your view of that idea.
Yeah, so not long after the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, Gilbert Mair was brought into this country, and he fell in love with one of the guides. And through the relationship that we shared with Gilbert Mair, we were able to build this tourism industry out at Te Wairoa, which is where previously we would host visitors as they went on to the pink and white terraces. And those relationships have kind of continued over the years, and we've been able to build these industries on the implicit relationship founded through Te Tiriti o Waitangi. It was, I heard the guy talking about before when those sovereigns from the Duke of Cornwall and York were here, that they took offence when our people walked in front of them. But, you got to recognise when you step into our territory, you're speaking to a sovereign. So it's a sovereign to sovereign, it's a mana to mana thing that our tupuna were able to do with these people. That's why I mentioned Apple and Google, because these are the big American corporations that realise the value in working with tangata whenua to build and develop their products.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you for that. Look, I think we'll leave the submission there, but thank you for your contribution, and thanks for your written submission, which we have as well. So, ka pai. Members, our next submitter is Tiato Rangi for you. See, Tiato Rangi is coming on now. Kia ora, Tiato Rangi. Welcome to the subcommittee of the Justice Select Committee. Thank you for submitting on this bill. We've got you for 5 minutes, so I'll hand straight over to you in the interest of time. Ka pai.
Tēnā koe te tākuta e Duncan Webb, koutou hoki o tira hāpai ki tō taha, nā reira mihi kawana kia koutou. Ko te atarangi whiu tōku ingoa no ngā puhi, Ngāti Rangi Nui, Ngāti Maniapuko hoki. Kei taku ukai pō ki tauranga moana hau e noho ana. Thank you for this opportunity to present to the committee. My name is Tiato Rangi Whiu, and I'm here today as a descendant of my ngāpuhi, Ngāti Rangi Nui, and Ngāti Maniapuko tūpuna. I reside in Tauranga, the ancestral lands of my Ngāti Rangi Nui heritage. Ko tahi atu ki te kaupapa, straight to the kaupapa. You should all be familiar with my submission, and as such, I reiterate the following. I do not support all provisions in the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill. In particular, its purpose to rewrite the principles which have been interpreted and implied in law for many decades, and the principles, civil government, rights of hapu and iwi Māori, and right to equity, which in plain English language are mutually contradictory. By virtue that the principles are mutually contradictory makes it impossible for the Crown to govern in the best interests of all people, while recognising hapu and iwi Māori have specific rights which the Crown will protect, and simultaneously recognising that everyone is equal. I question, therefore, the intent to carry through this unilateral decision. Is it intended to be malicious and disingenuous in design? To continue with the proposed bill will undoubtedly lead to confusion, disharmony, obfuscation, resulting in a national-wide melee, potentially pitting communities against each other. Hapu and iwi Māori will suffer, thereby regressing Māori further into deprivation and poverty. This is not an Aotearoa that I want for my four mokopuna and my unborn uri. I want an Aotearoa where my mokopuna are not deprived of the ability to thrive, realise their potential with confidence in their own identity. As a way forward, I recommend that any further or future attempts by the Crown to reframe the Treaty of Waitangi and or its interpretation needs to be done in partnership with Māori, with hapu and iwi Māori. It cannot unilaterally change an agreement to a bilateral arrangement. Hoi no kona tāku I whakatauhai I tēnei ahiahi. E tuku ana te raka kōrero kia koutou, kia wātea mai koutou ki te tuku pātai kia ai. So thank you for this opportunity, but welcome the opportunity to have an engaged conversation and take any questions that you have.
Kia ora, thank you for that. We do have some time for questions if members have them. Steve Abel.
Kia ora, Steve.
Kia ora. I appreciate its submission. I sometimes feel like I'm the only one asking questions, but I'm happy to do that. We've had some really substantive submissions, and it's been inspiring, I think, for a lot of us, the extent of the response. One thing I wanted to sort of drill into is your thing about the mutually contradictory. I sort of have this view that part of the challenge, and I'm not in support of the Principles Bill at all, of course, but I have this view that the part of the challenge that it makes Aotearoa New Zealand a unique place in terms of our unique constitutional arrangements is that we do have to get our heads around this idea of us having equality in our humanity and equal rights in things like the Bill of Rights, but also having a recognition of the rights of tangata whenua in tēnā rangatiratanga. And that part of the beauty of our constitutional arrangement is that we are able to deal with those, the nuances of how we do that, how we have a democracy, but we also have underlying rights that facilitate that democracy, that our nation was founded in a recognition of the sovereignty of Māori. And so I just wonder, as part of that dance and that kind of coming to terms with how to make that work, part of the beauty of our constitutional arrangement, and it doesn't require, as the author of this current bill believes, the nullification of Māori rights and the idea that somehow to make us more equal, you have to take away rights from Māori.
So I'm going to pick up, you've got a number of statements that you said in your kōrero, Steve, and I'm just going to pick up on one strand. So I'm going to use the reference that you've made in terms of the dance. A beautiful dance can only happen in harmony with the people that you're dancing with. And if I think about Matatini, that's about to occur in a couple of weeks, where you have 40 people on stage and a number of spectators there, the dance that occurs on the stage needs to be done in harmony. And so I think, going back to the last statement that I made, that this cannot be done unilaterally, which is the approach that is going forward. So I think we can accommodate the range of questions that you have offered in your kōrero, but it needs to be done with others, not by the single party.
100%. Kia ora. Thank you.
It requires a partnered discourse, is what it requires.
Look, thank you very much for that submission, Tiato. Really, look, we are out of time, and I'm not sure there's been a glitch on the internet there, but Kia ora, thank you very much for your submission.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Ka pai. Members, the next submitter is Te Tiriti is us. I think we've got Barbara Blake online. Kia ora, Barbara, I can see you there. We've got you for, once we've got your video and audio, we've got you for 10 minutes. Barbara, if you can hear me, just get that audio going and video preferably.
Okay, we're here now.
But no, that's all right. It always takes a moment. Kira, thank you for submitting. We've got you for 10 minutes. So in the interest of time, I'll just hand straight over to you. Go.
Tēnā koe, Dr. Webb. Tēnā koutou to the committee members. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Rob Smith aho. I'm a retired plant ecologist and one of the founders of Te Tiriti is Us. We established Te Tiriti is Us a year ago because we were shocked by the wording of the bill and the language used by the supporters of this bill. As senior Pākehā New Zealanders, we knew that this bill undermines our foundational document and that as tangata Te Tiriti, we could not look away. We decided we would rather defend Te Tiriti o Waitangi. We love that New Zealand is a values-based society founded on a treaty between the people who lived here on this island and those who wanted to come and live here. The messages of our campaign were non-aggressive and peaceful, and they see as core Kiwi values. They are unity, keeping promises, fairness, sharing, aroha, and partnership. We see the treaty as the foundation of the peaceful and equitable way we have lived here in Aotearoa, a treasure which belongs to all of us, something to be enhanced, not diminished. We want to express to the committee our deep concerns regarding the misuse of language, and Barbara will take this in depth further, by the supporters of the bill. They claim Maori have special rights based on race, a claim that's simply not accurate. The treaty guaranteed all the common law rights of British subjects to every person living in Aotearoa, and in doing so in the common law, it affirmed the validity of Indigenous rights and enshrined that principle to those rights as being respected by all. What concerns us is that this bill would strip away those foundational rights solely from Maori. This action amounts to discrimination on the basis of race. It's profoundly troubling, and while the bill purports to protect rights, it would in fact remove the very rights that were secured for the Maori here under the treaty. This reveals to us the stark hypocrisy at the heart of this proposed bill.
Kia ora koutou, my name's Barbara Blake and I'm a librarian, so I'm interested in words. The first word that I want to talk about is race. It's not in the bill itself, but it's been used a lot in the discourse surrounding it. And we're not used to using this word here. We're more likely to use words like ethnicity, culture, background, heritage, affiliation. But David Seymour calls the Treaty of Waitangi a treaty between races, and this is untrue. The treaty was, as Rob said, a treaty between the people who lived here and the people who wanted to come and settle here. The genetic makeup of these groups is irrelevant. And to make this debate about race is, we believe, a calculated effort to create social division. It's particularly designed to worry older New Zealanders who grew up in an era of cultural assimilation. And we believe that right-wing lobby groups have been grooming seniors to believe the false narrative of Maori privilege and Maori takeover. And we find this cynical and absolutely immoral. If I turn to the bill itself, when I read proposed principle 1, the word that stands out to me is power. In fact, the phrases are full power to govern, full power to make laws. But when I consider the role of the government that I have elected, I don't see it as having absolute power, but rather as carrying the duty and responsibility to make good law. Governance is not about exerting power. It's about protecting people's rights and making fair and just legislation. This term full power has been imported from the American political system. And while the term's not inherently negative, in this context and political climate, its inclusion is neither accidental nor neutral. It's been deliberately placed in this bill to shape a particular libertarian ideology. More appropriate language would have been the duty to govern well, or the responsibility to legislate in the best interests of all. This phrase, full power, has an authoritarian ring to it and should not be enshrined in our legislation. Then in proposed principle 2, I read the word rights, including reference to each person's right from the explanatory note. Now, rights are, of course, crucial. However, this bill champions individual rights over the responsibilities of governments. Rights don't exist without responsibilities. The right to free speech carries with it the responsibility to speak truthfully. Now, the established treaty principles, which have been developed since 1975, do consider responsibilities alongside rights, and these include the Crown's responsibility to provide redress for past injustices, the duty to actively manage Article 2 of the treaty, ensuring iwi Māori can manage their own resources, and the responsibility of the Crown to act for the mutual benefit of both treaty partners. And finally, I turn to proposed principle 3, and the word I read there is equality. The choice of this word rather than fairness, equity, or substantive equality is telling. Equity means equal outcomes, not just equal input or equal treatment. And this bill's emphasis is on equal administration of the law. It uses the simplistic notion of equality rather than equity, and so undermines the spirit of the established treaty principles. In recent political talk and talk regarding equality has implied that Māori are getting better treatment from the system. But any statistic, health, incarceration, employment, suicide, any statistic will clearly tell you otherwise. In this bill, power, individual rights, and a one-dimensional idea of equality trump collective rights, the responsibilities and obligations of government, and fairness.
Thank you, Barbara. We ask the committee to recognise the deliberate and insidious choice of language in this piece of legislation. This bill is an attempt to change the New Zealand legislative lexicon by stealth and to undermine our New Zealand values. It sets a dangerous precedent for future lawmaking. This bill might not pass, but similar ones could emerge. Please, committee, be mindful of the misuse of this language and the dangers of allowing them to proceed. So in summary, we see the principles in the proposal as dishonest and an attempt by the ACT Party to rewrite the treaty on ideas that are an anathema to our values. This blatant attempt to rewrite what was a bilaterally agreed treaty unilaterally is not the Kiwi way. Since 1975, our nation, led by both governing parties at different times, has worked cooperatively to redress wrongs and build a society which is based on the treaty. And while we agree the Crown has the right to make laws, it also has a responsibility to continue to build a fair and just society for all. The treaty is our fundamental constitutional document here in Aotearoa. It's also our human rights document and is recognised as an international treaty and admired overseas. So we ask you to please continue to protect this treasure. Ngā mihi.
Kia ora, thanks for that. Look, we've got about a minute left, so if we've got time for a quick question, I'll go to Steve Abel.
Kia ora, Duncan. Thank you so much, both, and thank you for your advocacy and the creation of. I have one of your posters on my wall in my office. So, I think your articulation that senior New Zealanders like ourselves have been groomed by far-right groups such as Hobson's Pledge to believe the false narrative of a Māori takeover. We find this to be calculating and immoral. It's deeply concerning to me that there's these imported kind of culture war ideas that feel like they've not come from here. They've come from ideas abroad, and stoking that racial division or is part of a strategy that's been used by the far right abroad. Can you speak to your perceptions of that?
It's hard to pinpoint it. It's insidious, isn't it? It's kind of crept in, and in this bill, those words have crept in. And if we look across to the Regulatory Standards Bill, and one of their principles talks about personal liberties. And again, it's not a bad thing, but this is imported language. We don't usually talk about liberties. It's a very American kind of phrase. We talk about freedoms. Right. So there's a very insidious infiltration of the words and the ideas from that American right. I don't know how it works, but it kind of gets in there.
And I'd like to just add that I got my hair cut today. It's polished. But anyway, the two hairdressers that I talked to both said to us, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. We're behind you all the way. And I'd never met these people before in protecting Te Tiriti. For them, it was, if you play with something often enough, you'll break it. So let's continue to preserve this magnificent treasure.
Kia ora. Thank you for that to you both. But our time is up, but thanks for your submission, and thanks for your substantive written submission as well. Dear members, we've got SJP O'Neal next, who will be hearing Simon O'Neal, I see. Kia ora, Simon. Welcome to the Justice Subcommittee. We've got you for 5 minutes to speak on the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill. So I'll hand straight over to you. Kia ora.
Hey, thank you, Duncan. Thank you for this privilege. Unfortunately, today I'm going to read out because I find talking about this just gets me really wound out. So I've written down what I'd like to say so I don't get too emotive. This isn't supplements my written submission, but just to be absolutely clear, I am 100% against this proposed legislation. It's a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. I think the bill exists solely as a sop to a minority party and as a trade-off for the governance of our country. I think it's a moral and ethical failure. I've spent a lot of time in industrial relations and, international relations and defence, and I see it maybe from a slightly different perspective, but I think this bill has been specifically designed to do three things, none of which I think are any good. It's designed to divide, because when a people's divided, it's easy to knock them over. And when we're divided, we're distracted. And distraction's the second objective of this bill. It's a distraction, just like the flag debate a decade or so ago, from some other bits of legislation that are pretty heinous that are being shoved through under the smokescreen. And lastly, it's designed to fix something that's not broken. And as anybody who's a wannabe DIYer knows, when you fix something that's not broken, you don't end up with something that's still not broken. You end up with something that never quite runs the same again. And half the time you end up with a little bag of bits you don't know what to do with. And I think that's the thing. If it's not broken, don't fix it. I've got a shed full of stuff where I've learnt that lesson. We signed the treaty in 1840. And unfortunately, the next 150 years, it kind of languished. In 1975, the government got serious about the treaty, established the tribunal, and then we codified the principles of partnership, participation, and protection in 1987. Now, I'm a late comer to this. A couple of decades ago, I probably would be talking on the other side of this legislation. But even I had heard of the principles way back then. And since then, we've never really felt or seen a need to establish the principles any further. They're accepted. And over the same period, we've established those principles more and more in our daily life through our Aotearoa, not just when we're doing legal stuff or doing stuff at work where it says we have to consider the principles. We consider it in our day-to-day life. They're good ideas. They're good principles. And I think New Zealand's a better place for that. These principles are now embedded in our culture, and we don't need a law to make that any more solid. When Jacinda Ardern in 2020 suggested we all be kind to each other, she didn't have to pass a law to make us be kind to each other. Although, if we're honest about it, after October 2020, she probably could have if she wanted to. And just as we don't need a law to make us kind, we don't need a law to make us apply principles that multiple generations have already adopted. This whole thing just makes me so angry. Just having another look through just before through the actual draft text, I mean, it doesn't even make a pretense of mentioning those principles. It's so blatant. I mean, I'd be offended if one of my students put that in front of me and we go away. It overwrites the treaty and further, if it's possible, further disenfranchises Maori from their own damn country. It overwrites the rights that we've already accepted for Maori as the established Indigenous peoples of Aotearoa before we came along and screwed it up for everybody. I'm sorry, I don't think we've made New Zealand better since we arrived. We've made it more like England, which is definitely a lot better. And the blatant malice of the bill just makes me sad and it makes me angry. I'm good at being angry. I don't like being sad. It's not me. But I work in healthcare in Te Tiriti, little town, very vulnerable communities, and every day I see the harm where someone forgets or maybe deliberately disregards those treaties, the partnership, the participation, the protection, and that hurts people. And that
Simon, I'm just going to interrupt and let you know you've got about 20 seconds to just...
I've got 20 seconds of word left. So we don't need to empower those people who don't want to apply the principles. The treaty's not broken. It doesn't need fixing. What we need to do is get on and fix what's really broken. Thank you.
Kia ora, Simon. Ngāmihi, thank you for your submission and thank you for your written submission as well. Kia ora.
Thank you, Duncan.
Kia ora, Simon. Thank you.
Members, our next submitter is Climate Tauranga Marlborough. Hopefully there'll be, and I see we've got someone called Donald Quick coming online now, who I am assuming will be presenting for Climate Tauranga Marlborough. Kia ora, Donald. Welcome to this Justice Subcommittee. We've got you down for 5 minutes to speak on the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill. I'll hand it straight over to you. You're on mute right now.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Good. Tihe mauli ora, ka tangi te titi, ka tangi te kaka, ka tangi hoki a hau. E mihi ana ki te runga rawa nāna ne ngā mea katoa. Rana nui ke runga papatua anuku ke raro, tēnā kōrua.
Acknowledgements to rangi nui above and papa below.
E te whenua e te tūranga o te iwi tēnā koe, e te mana whenua e mihi ana. E te honga mate haere, 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 e te honga ora kua hauhui mai ne tēnā koutou katoa. Ko ai au, no tau iwi a hau, no kotarana, no te tangata tiriti, ko don koe taku ingoa. I have given greetings and introduced myself in the Māori language, not out of appropriation, but out of love and respect, because it is te reo rangatira o te motu ne, and it holds the mana, the mātauranga, and the tikanga of its first peoples. I've been asked to speak on behalf of Climate Tauranga Marlborough, a growing group of over 140 Marlborough citizens deeply concerned about the effects of climate breakdown and biodiversity loss. In our submission, we propose that the treaty principles be withdrawn at the earliest opportunity. I will talk to 4 issues that form part of our written submission, namely matters of principle, climate justice, societal resilience, and belonging. First principle. The treaty, either in English or in Māori, makes no mention of principles. It is a legal and ethical agreement between the representatives of 2 sovereign peoples, not races, on 3 articles by which they will abide. Such an agreement is particularly bound by legal principles of international standing that parties are committed to honour their agreements in good faith. In respect of Te Tiriti or Waitangi, most New Zealand governments have failed to do this. The present coalition government is no different in the way they are promoting the Treaty Principles Bill, which seeks one-sidedly to amend the terms of the abiding agreement. This fills us with misgivings from a climate and biodiversity viewpoint, as we witness relevant government policies not living up to the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change. One coalition partner has even suggested reneging on that agreement. So much for honour as a principle and consequently our integrity as a people. Climate justice focuses on the unequal impacts of climate change on disadvantaged populations. Māori have been historically and systemically disadvantaged in terms of land, housing, health, culture and monetary well-being. Both drought and flooding in Northland and the effects of Hurricane Gabrielle, all worsened by climate change, have disproportionately affected and impoverished Māori. Many have become marginalised from political participation by the more immediate demand simply of living. If it were to be passed, the Treaty Principles Bill would compound the impacts of climate injustice. The bill, both in its content and its manner of implementation, seeks to diminish Māori mana and deny Māori tino rangatiratanga. In Te Tiriti, Te Whenua, the land and customary care of land and water is central to the notion of tino rangatiratanga. My understanding is that Māori traditionally see themselves as belonging and responsible to the whenua, a living entity from which they come and to which they return. This is a disjunction from the colonialist and more recently neoliberal view of the land as something to possess as a commodity and to use as private property. By attempting to disenfranchise Māori and Māori custom, the bill promotes divisive debate rather than constructive and coherent conversation. It runs counter to the advice of the Climate Commission, emphasising the key element, I quote, of Māori climate leadership expressed through intergenerational taiao strategies grounded in tikanga and Tauranga.
Donald, I'm just going to interrupt you and let you know you've got about 20 seconds to wind up.
Okay, I was speaking on behalf of a group, but only given 5 minutes. In my introductory mihi, I align my voice with those of the TT, of the mutton bird, and the land-based kaka. We are calling in Parliament in good faith to honour the original articles of Te Tiriti, to dismiss the Treaty Principles Bill, and to respect Māori tino rangatiratanga. I have addressed 4 issues of principle, of climate justice, of societal cohesion, and of belonging. If we act together in good faith, then we must come to some agreement how we understand our relationship with land, water, and air. Do they belong to us as a right, or do we belong responsibly to them? Climate change is adding urgency to the matter of our belonging.
Ngamihi, kia ora, Donald. Thank you for your submission, and thank you also for your written submission, which we have. So thanks for that. Time is limited, and I apologise for that.
Kia ora.
Members, our next submitter is the NTDI, Te Aotearoa, and I see there we've got Winifred and Ripeka coming on. Kia ora, Ripeka.
Kia ora no rā koe tau.
And we've got Winifred just in the waiting room there.
Oh, okay.
Here we go.
We've got you for
There we go.
Yep.
Can you hear me, Duncan?
I can hear you both, so that's great.
Kia ora korua.
Kia ora rā.
Kia ora, we've got you for 10 minutes. So in the interest of time, I'll hand over straight away to get onto your kōrero.
Kia ora koutou. Our oral submission will be delivered in 2 parts. I will deliver the first part, then hand over to our newly elected NZDI Te Tiriti National President, Ripeka Lessels. Mā ngā haumi te maunga, waipawa te awa, taki tumata waka, taki putu marae, te autanga māhaki te iwi, Ngāti Wāhia te hapu, ko Winifred Morris tuku ingoa. I was educated at Wellington Girls College. I have a Bachelor of Education from Victoria University and a teaching background. I'm one of 16 Te Reo Ariari representatives in the country. I am the Te Reo Ariari representative for Manawatu, Wanganui and Ruapehu. Te Reo Ariari believe that tino rangatiratanga as a Māori cultural concept as recognised in Article 2 of Treaty of Waitangi is a collective rangatiratanga and recognises the importance of hapu, of tribalism, a natural aspect of how our tūpuna lived, while we also believe that each person is responsible for their own rangatiratanga, as in te taiao ake o te tangata. This bill does nothing to differentiate between tino rangatiratanga as in Article 2 and te taiao ake o te tangata. The bill seeks to redefine the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, but there is nothing in this bill that does that at all, but rather seeks to nullify, extinguish, and deceitfully rewrite the intentions of the Treaty of Waitangi. This bill does not recognise the uninterrupted rights of tangata whenua, Māori over their taonga, and to exercise their self-determination as expressed in the Treaty of Waitangi, but rather if these rights differ from everyone else, will only be recognised in a historical treaty claim. Does the member, the author of this bill, realise that if the Treaty of Waitangi had not been breached and if government after government had honoured the Treaty of Waitangi from the outset, there would be no need for treaty claims? The impact of this bill on Māori has been demonstrated by the submitters who have gone before me. That impact is more so for educators who are Māori that often implement policies that reflect negatively on our culture. It is completely erroneous for this bill to assume that any components of it would deliver equal opportunities for Māori. Equality can often be premised on an uneven playing field. An example, according to the latest poverty stats, 1 in 4 Māori children live in poverty, second only to Pacific children. Immediately, it is not equality that is needed to level the playing field, but equity. This bill does not recognise this. For years, tamariki Māori and their cultural capital have been undervalued and undermined, creating low self-esteem and, in some cases, lifetime trauma. It has been the responsibility of the educator, and more often the Māori educator, to teach the stories of origins so as to restore our tamariki to health and to live free from trauma. This bill does not validate the place of our stories. Te Reo Ariari recommend that the Treaty Principles Bill be abandoned. Nō reira tēnā koutou katoa. I'll hand over to Ripeka Lessels now.
Kia ora wāti kia koutou. Ahakua ko oti a hau te tuku I waku ake kōrero kia koutou. Tēnei au e noho mai nei te tautoko I te reo areare I tēnei wā. So ko Ripeka Lessels tōku I noa ahua mai rā hau I nā pai mauna o nā tiawa, o nai tūhoi o te arawa o nā te tūwhare toa hoki. Ko au te manukura o NZI te rūroa mō nā tau e rua e hare aki nei. Ko te rūroa te inua Māori o NZI, the New Zealand Education Institute. Ko ro ake au e noho mai nei I runei te wahana Māori o te rūroa. Ko te reo areare te inua tawa rōpū. E noho nei au ki te whakahe I te pire nei, te pire e whakawhiu nei I a tāua te Māori. Ko tā te rūroa mahi, ko te tautoko I te Treaty of Waitangi ki roto I nā kura katoa te motu. Ki te hāpai nā mahi o te kai whakaako, ke tai e nā tamariki me o rātai na whānau te whaiwahi atu ai ki nā akorana e hia tia nei rātau. Ki te aki nā whānau ki te poipoi a rātai tamariki, ke ai rātau, ki te angitūtanga o te ako. E ai ki te pere nei, he ori te tātou katoa, ahakoa te tai o te kiri, ahakoa te reo kai te waha. E kore te pere nei, e ata te tiro ki o tātou nā tuakiritanga, me nā āhuatana o taua tuakiritanga. E nei ka whakawhiu katoa tātou ki roto I te kōhua kotahi, katahi ka rui hia mai. Te e mutina mai o te he. Karikau a te reo areare o te rūroa e hia kia tāmi tonutia, kia whakaiti tonutia a tātou tamariki I runei te aukati o te tuakiritanga aki o te tanata. Kai konei mātau te wahana Māori o te rūroa, hei tuara mō nā kai whakaako Māori, kai roto I nā kura huri noi te motu. He reo whakahe I nā kaupapa here a te kāwaratana e tāia te whakakore, te tūturitanga o te mana motu hake o te Treaty of Waitangi. E whakakore nei I tō tātou nā rangatiratana I runa I nā mahi a te mātaurana. E whakai ana te rūroa, kai te tangata whenua te mana motu hake tūturi nei, kia kauarawa e talohia I tētahi. E tūnei rā mātou o te rūroa ki te whakahe I tēnei pire, whakahe rawātu I tēnei pire, kia ora rawātu kia koutou. Kua whakatūwherehia mai rā e tēnā he pātai rā tā koutou.
Thank you for that. We do have time for questions. I see Rawari has one.
Kia ora, tēnā kōrua. Ngā mihi nui kia kōrua I tēnei rā. Me ngā kōrero ko whāriki hei mui te aruaro o tēnei o ngā komiti. E Ripeka. He roa tawa hau I wo kōrero mo te taha ki te mātauranga. And he te rape a waru te kaupai hene tu a tātou tamariki kei roto i ngā kura auraki. Ko te toinga kei roto i ngā kura kaupapa, ngā kura aiwi. Me pēhea rā, en kei te tutuki pai ai ki tā te hihi a te tari mātauranga. Hea awa whakaro, me pēhea rā, me he mea ka tutuki pēr tēnei pire ki tōna tūmanakohanga. Ka pēhea tātou i roto i te mātauranga, wā tātou tamariki pokopuna, wera atua huatanga katoa. Ka noho orite, ki ngā whakahaere o nai atunu nei, o ka heke iho, ka heke iho i roto i ngā atua huatanga katoa.
Waka tāku e te tiro atu nei ka heke haere. Iri nei te mea, ko oti nā whakatau o Statistics New Zealand, mō nā tamariki kai te ako i roto i te reo Māori, nā tamariki e ako i nā kura kaupapa, kura aiwi. Nā tamariki ko eke ki te ahi, te taumata e tikana marātau. Kai runa no atu rā nā tamariki Māori. And e mohi o tuni nei tā aiwa. Ko tētahi o nā kaupapa nunui kia eke e nei tamariki, ko tō rātau tuakiritanga. Ia hu mai rātau i hea. E rā mahi katoa ki te kore, ki te tutuki i tēnei pire, ka whakakorehia te mahi, any effect ki te tiriti o Waitangi. Koe rā tā tēnei pire e hia hesia nei. Kia whakakorehia te tiriti o Waitangi, i roto i nā kore, ko tipata hia mai rā tēnā mahi, tēnei kāwana, tēnei kāwanatana, te whakakore. Ko tātou nā anga ki te tiriti o Waitangi. So, ka heke haere, Rawiri, ka heke haere.
Me pēhea rā te urua te tiriti o Waitangi ki roto i ngā whakahaere o ngā kura katoa. Aha koa auraki mai, kura kaupapa mai, hei compulsory subject. Kia kore tātou hoki mai ki tēnei tuahuatanga, engari ka mohi o whānui te Aotearoa ki te mana me te tapo te tiriti o Waitangi.
O te mea tuatahi, waihohia te ture, giving effect to the Treaty of Waitangi ki roto i nā ture. Waihohia ki reira, te tae e nā kura katoa, te whaiwahi atu ai ki te Treaty of Waitangi, me o nā ahuatana katoa. Te whakakorehia tēnā, ki te tano mai rā tērā i te ture, pera i te koe rā te hea a tēnei kāwanatana, ka kore rā tātou, ka kore rā wā tātou na tamariki e ako, ka kore te ao Pākehā e ako. Ko roa ki tātou, ko tahi rā oro te kautau tātou, e noho pērāna. Kare rā, te tiriti o Waitangi puta mai te wā i āhau i te kura. Engari, waihohia ki roto i te ture.
Apai.
Kia ora. Kia ora koroa. We're pretty much out of time, I'm afraid. But thank you so much, Ripeka and Winifred, for your submission and also for the written submission that we have as well. So kia ora for that.
Kia ora watu, kia koutou.
Members, our next submitter is Kez Sheldon, who we have for 5 minutes. Is he coming online now?
Yes. Okay, can you hear me well?
I can indeed, Kez.
Okay.
Welcome to the subcommittee of the Justice Committee. We've got you here for 5 minutes to submit on the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill. We'll just hand it straight over to you. Go.
Okay, well, kia ora ki te koutou katoa. And thank you for having me. As you know, my name's Kez Sheldon. I have a work background in documentary film, in mental health, including sexual abuse crisis. I was a therapist. I was also a manager for the Citizens Advice Bureau for over a decade in Newtown. So I care deeply about justice and climate change. I'm a founder member of Fridays for Future here in Wellington, and I'm involved in a number of other organisations involved in climate. And it's because I care about the future that I'm choosing to speak to keep Te Tiriti o Waitangi and to dismiss the Treaty Principles Bill as completely unfit. We know Indigenous knowledge is critical to caring for the land and for people's future. Te Tiriti, as it was signed by most Māori chiefs, is a break on ecological recklessness, because most Māori espouse greater respect for the connection to land and nature than for money-making. Māori have had several hundred years looking after this land from a nature-based spiritual knowledge of connection. When Māori speak of Papatunuku and Ranginui, land and sky, it's about the land and the climate and their interrelationship. When humans do things to the land, it affects the climate, and modern science shows this clearly. We need nature, and nature needs us now. No nature, no body. For a moment, imagine being without breath or food, without each other. We're already seeing the changes in the growing seasons and the loss of produce, the disasters, and those who know this land best hold precious knowledge. And what of the ocean, Tangaroa, not just as a source of food, but as a source of well-being? Ocean overheating from human interventions is a huge risk to our human survival, both as a result and a cause of climate disaster. And it seems the understanding of interconnectedness of humans and nature has been increasingly shared and supported by the many people growing up and living in New Zealand, Aotearoa, as Māori knowledge has been widely spread. Māori culture is a source of pride and strength. Our humanity depends on seeing the importance of people, ngā tangata, and our relationships, as well as knowing that we're children of nature. That's why Te Tiriti is based in partnership. Recently, the great respect for the relationships between people in Māori understanding is evident in the document Matike Mai from 2016, reporting from over 250 different groups and individuals from all over. Māori affirmed the importance of balance, of community, of structures to resolve difference without violence or imprisonment. So Te Tiriti, by underlining partnership, gives Māori and Tauiwi Pākehā a place of belonging, Aotearoa, New Zealand. This is a psychological superpower for all of us, because knowing our belonging and our connections is what gives us strength. And why else would 100,000 people take to the streets of the capital? 300,000 people put in submissions, mostly against this bill. All of us need the future thinking of Māori, thinking of the grandchildren of the grandchildren, to survive the damage that greed has already inflicted on nature and on our climate. To understand this is critical. There's much wrong with the Treaty Principles Bill as a legal document. It uses language in a manipulative way, and people have spoken to this. I'm not going to go into this now. I simply want to say that this bill is highly divisive. To cope with climate change, we need a unity of purpose to manage the oncoming storms, whatever and wherever they may be. I urge the committee to reject it. Thank you.
Kia ora, Kez. Thank you for that. We are actually pretty much exactly at the 5-minute mark, so we'll leave it there. But kia ora, thank you for your words and your written submission.
Kia ora. Thank you all.
Members, our next submitter is Kathleen Ryan, and I can see that Kathleen's on her iPhone, so she'll be with us very shortly. Kia ora, Kathleen. We can see you there, and I'm hoping we can hear you. We've got you for 5 minutes to submit on this Principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill, so I will hand straight over to you.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Good afternoon. My background, I was born in Oamaru in North Otago, or Oamaru as it's now usually called, and I was brought up within my family and in that community with some traditional values, respect, fairness, and generally getting on with people, whether they were from my own culture or other cultures. We were proud of our race relations in those days. It was the general feel of society, but I didn't know anything about my history, our history, and don't know if I ever knew or saw any Māori. We weren't taught about the treaty at school or about history. So I was shocked in the 70s when I went off to varsity and started to realise I'd been brought up with rose-tinted spectacles, or a convenient aspiration in terms of treaty relations and race relations, but not a reality. I'm proud of our history of the last 50 years, the increasing acknowledgement of Te Tiriti, and a willingness of us all, Māori and Pākehā, to live together in an evolving partnership. The treaty conversation is a critical one for our society. They're not easy conversations, and Pākehā have held and still hold the upper hand, as the introduction of this, I say dastardly bill, shows. And also as treaty settlements show, given that they generally provide redress of around only 1% of what Māori lost, and not including all the Māori lives in those wars, those land wars for settlers. I oppose this bill, as while leaving the wording of Te Tiriti intact, it completely undermines its content, that is, the 3 articles that are central, that are the mainstay of the treaty. We need a real ongoing conversation to take place, particularly in this run-up to the 200th anniversary of the treaty. I would be up for that conversation, and I would hope that the rest of us would be as well. I ask that you reject this bill, and that across government and across our communities, that we start to have more real conversations about what the treaty is, what its principles are, and what it could mean to us and our future. I'm open to your questions.
Sure, Kathleen, thank you for that. Members, we have a little bit of time for questions if anyone has a question.
Yep, I'll ask a question, Duncan.
Rawari.
Thank you, Kathleen, for your insightful presentation today. And I did hear you talk about that the settlements have awarded or settled with iwi at only 1% of their total due. And do you think it is fair with the rhetoric at the moment that Māori are getting special treatment when since the 90s, Māori have received $2.6 billion in settlements, and just this year alone, tax cuts for landlords got $2.9 billion. And I don't know whether you have a perspective on equal treatment by this government or any other government, and whether the Treaty Principles Bill is actually an honest attempt to kind of privatise or create a free market here in New Zealand.
To be frank, I actually consider the current bill is a repeat of what Judge Prendergast sought to do in 1877 when he gave justice, when he described the treaty as a simple nullity. And I think that was convenient because it meant he didn't have to deal with it. I think the treaty is central to who we are as a society and how we will deal with the issues as we move ahead. I accept that 1% isn't very much at all, particularly when we consider what goes to private individuals through tax cuts. At the same time, I'm aware that the Māori economy, despite Māori, a quarter of them being in poverty, the Māori economy is now worth around 25-28%, whereas the Māori population is less than about 18 to 20%. And so I actually think Māori are pulling above their weight despite having their hands tied behind their back. I've actually just finished reading Privilege in Perpetuity, Exploding a Pākehā Myth by Peter Mahana. And
look, we'll leave it there. We'll leave it there, Kathleen. We'll leave the book selling for another day. But thanks for that. We are out of time, and time is tight. So we're going to.
I was looking forward to reading that book, Duncan.
Very much.
Thank you, Kathleen. Members, our next submitter is the Asian Legal Network, who we have for 10 minutes.
Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora. I think we have Aria and Darren with us here for the Asian Legal Network. Kia ora. We've got 10 minutes with you, so I'll hand straight over to you to talk about the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill.
Kia ora koutou, mihi atu ki a koe te tiomana, I a mema o te parimata, kia ora tēnei te mihi. E tika hoki ki te mihi ki te mana o te tiriti Waitangi me whakaputanga me ngā tūpuna o era mea. Ai, ko Aria tēnei, ko Darren ahau, no mau te tino o Maria ki te whakakanohi I te Asian Legal Network I te rangi nei. Kia ora koutou. It's a very big privilege to be here submitting against the Treaty Principles Bill. We're here on behalf of the Asian Legal Network. We are an organisation of lawyers, academics, as well as community organisers who want a better Aotearoa with a particular focus on Asian communities, particularly the margins of Asian communities who are often left out of policy and law. More recently, a lot of our work has required a big Te Tiriti focus. It's really connected with what we do, and it's because of that and the expertise we've got, which we are submitting today, and we'll show those connections in our submission.
As Dan said, we are speaking today in strong opposition of the Treaty Principles Bill. I'd like to begin with an overview of our submissions today. In the interest of time, we will defer to
The
our
Chinese have put this whole presentation up into everybody here. Beautiful. All right.
In the interest of time, we will defer to our written submissions on the full reasons of our opposition. We tautoko the submissions before us that oppose the bill on similar grounds of reasoning, in particular, but not limited to, the submissions of Te Hungaroa Māori o Aotearoa and Asian supporting tino rangatiratanga, as well as the group of 50 King's Councils that spoke before us. Today, we will focus on our fifth ground of opposition, that the bill may lead to detrimental, unintended consequences for other equity measures and specific protections for marginalised peoples. There is no doubt that the bill will be disproportionately and detrimentally harmful towards tangata whenua. As tauiwi, we are sharing our perspectives in support of he whakaputanga and te tiriti, in support of tangata whenua, in support of tino rangatiratanga. Today, we wish to share the impact the bill will have on our community to show that tangata whenua are not alone in the collective fight against colonialism.
So often we get asked, why is the Asian Legal Network interested in Te Tiriti Waitangi? In short, we think it's the right thing to do. If we're pursuing a good foundation, we think, for Aotearoa, for belonging for Asian peoples, it's important to get it right. We think Te Tiriti sets a good framework for this. But also, a lot of the reason why Te Tiriti gets disregarded is because of colonisation. And the problem for us is many of our peoples have faced colonisation both here and abroad. So there is an affinity against measures that are colonial. But more specifically, there is the adage that what's good for Te Ao Māori and Te Tiriti is good for Aotearoa. We think this bill is a really good example of what is bad for Te Tiriti and Te Ao Māori is bad for Aotearoa. So our focus is going to be specifically how this addresses Asian communities in particular. But we total everything that's already been said about how it overrides Te Tiriti o Waitangi. I'll just pause, Rawari, if you had the haritona, kia ora. So we'll stop for questions at the end, but there are three key points that we'll highlight as to why Asian communities will be feeling a bit anxious about this bill passing through. The first is there is a huge consolidation of power in Parliament to override the courts. We've heard about the ability to define rights, retrospectively change rights. Now, the terrifying part of this is these rights are much bigger than just rights. These are constitutional foundations. The Waitangi Tribunal found, and we mihi to fire Kathleen just before talking about Wiparata, the Waitangi Tribunal said that this bill has the ability to turn back the clock to Wiparata 1877. If you're an Asian person, 5 years after passing of Wiparata were a lot of really problematic laws passed by this House that addressed, that excluded Asian peoples from migrating to Aotearoa. Now, if Parliament has the ability to change rights when it wants to by the majority, and these are constitutional rights and self-determination, it leaves open a terrible worrying precedent that this could happen with any other minority group. So that is one of the problems of it's not just separation of powers and a legalistic idea. This will have potential consequences for other minority groups and minority rights. The second part is that equality has been misused in this particular principle, the redefined Principle 3, to undercut equity measures. And by equity measures, we mean that certain communities will require equity measures such as the Māori Health Authority. Sometimes this is because it is addressing problems set up by colonisation, the effects of colonisation. It is also a practical reality for Asian communities, for instance, where we will need translation services. We will need specific linguistic, cultural services. A lot of our people don't do well with mental health. A lot of our people require extra support. Now, if you use equality as a blanket application and say it is part of our constitutional foundations, this worries a lot of Asian programs. And that is something we're concerned about. Now, how does this work in practice? What is it specific with this bill? The courts have applied treaty principles, because of how foundational it is, into legislation even when Te Tiriti is not mentioned. So does this mean that this bill will now say equality applies across many different programs, funding, and impact other legislation? At best, it creates a very convoluted, unclear sense of what the law is. This can create a chilling effect on decision makers to fund, say, Asian family service providers, for instance. At worst, it means it's going to completely cut these programs because they don't fit equality. That's the worst part of what could happen. Now, it is possible that someone who sponsors this bill might say, oh, actually, we didn't mean for this to apply to everyone, which begs the question, who does this apply to? Which would mean that this bill just only applies to Māori and Māori rights and Māori equity measures, which ironically means that Māori are targeted in applying equality measures, which in itself is self-defeating. So it either applies across all equity measures, which is bad, or it just applies to Māori equity measures, which is very bad. So that is something to contend with why we think equality is misapplied here, very dangerous, and also what does it mean for the intersections of Asian communities, our disabled whānau, our queer whānau, these compound. The last part is process. People like Sir Geoffrey Palmer has talked about process being so important. Asian peoples at the best of times aren't well represented in government and decision making. Now, when you truncate the process even further, it means that our views are rarely ever properly talked about. A lot of these issues I've mentioned have probably, that we've mentioned have probably not been surfaced because the timing is far too short. And that's let alone the treaty partners, the partners to Te Tiriti, who haven't been properly part of this discussion. So I'll stop there in that this process is damaging, it is concerning at a societal and a constitutional level. And we really support that. We really urge that this committee does not support this bill. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, thank you for that. We've got probably time for a question. I see Rauri has had one earlier, so we'll go to him first.
Oh, tēnā koe, Darren, ia oti rā, ki tā kōrero I tēnei rā. I just wanted to say, apologise for my mute not being on, but I was really, really blown away by your introduction to the presentation, and thank you for the kōrero in your presentation and the insightful knowledge that you shared with us. Just very quickly, the Tiriti o Waitangi, before the Treaty Principles Bill was presented into this particular process, Aotearoa has been a very inclusive country before that. And this has created some huge angst and division within the country. Have you seen a big change just in your own observation since the introduction of the Treaty Principles Bill, in the way you see your legal practice, or just even in your own community, or and even in your own whānau?
I'm based in Tamaki Makaurau. The amount of violence that Asian peoples have faced has increased, types of racism. That's because Asian peoples have always largely been a punching bag when things have gone wrong. Economy turns down, blame the migrants who come in. This is a global trend. The lack of social cohesion is terribly concerning for us, and the process of this bill, with the lack of public consultation and education as well, has meant that this will be an increased risk. Yes.
Thank you for that, and I echo Rawari's acknowledgement of your reo. Steve, unfortunately we don't have time for a question from you, so we'll move on to the next submitter, who is Peter Claywood. Thank you again for your...
o Valentine's me te matinga a kapene kuki. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, Peter. Welcome to the Justice Select Committee, the subcommittee of. We've got you down to hear from you for 10 minutes on the Treaty Principles Bill. I'll hand straight over to you. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko whanahau ki raro I te monga tua o wharepapa. Ko pakeke hau ki ngā tahataha I te awa waimea. Ko whanahau ki te whenua o ngā iwi o te tau ihu. Ngō ingarani, ngō ārani, ngō wera o kutipuna. Ko Peter Clayworth ahau. I am Peter Clayworth. I'm a Pākehā born and raised in Nelson, now living in Wellington. I've worked as a professional historian for over 25 years, for much of that time in the field of treaty-related research. I am making the submission purely in a private capacity and not speaking for my employer. I'm not a treaty expert and I am not a fluent speaker of Te Reo, but I have read the text Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Māori text, the treaty Te Tiriti, and I've also read the English text of the Treaty of Waitangi. I've also read a range of historical works discussing the treaty and listened to speakers on it over many years, and I have read the Treaty Principles Bill. I am strongly opposed to the Treaty Principles Bill, and as a historian I can categorically state that the principles set out in the bill do not, in my opinion, in any way reflect the content or intent of either the treaty, the English text, or Te Tiriti o Waitangi. The original treaty was and remains an agreement between the Crown and those Māori rangatira who signed it. And with the exception of 39 rangatira who signed an English text of the treaty, approximately, I gather, 500 rangatira signed Te Tiriti. And those who did sign the English version would have had that explained to them in Te Reo by someone who had a good command of both English and Te Reo. I agree with those who argue that the only relevant text to Māori, and by extension to the rest of the country, is Te Tiriti, the Te Reo Māori version, the version signed by the tupuna in 1840. Any principles derived from Te Tiriti should, in my opinion, be based on that Māori text rather than the English version. But I can see no evidence that the authors of the Treaty Principles Bill had any knowledge or have any knowledge of Te Reo Māori, and nor can I see evidence that they had knowledge of the meaning of Te Tiriti, the Māori text. Now, it has been further argued that the real treaty in 1840 was in effect the oral debate between the rangatira, the missionaries, the Crown representatives there, and that continuing debate in not just at Waitangi but at each of the places where the treaty was signed. In a similar fashion, I believe it could be argued today that the real treaty is the evolving understandings and accommodation reached through 185 years of debate, conflict, and cooperation that have occurred between Crown and Māori, and to an extent between tangata whenua and the other peoples of Aotearoa. I don't see the Treaty Principles Bill as taking account of either of those debates in 1840 or what has occurred since. To me, the so-called principles set out in the bill are an ahistorical wish list of how a minor political party would like to define Māori in this country. To me, the bill aims to relegate Māori to the role of simply being another ethnic group. I see Te Tiriti as recognising the role that Māori were and remain the original people, the tangata whenua of this country, but I also see it as now serving a purpose of acting as a type of boxing ring, a place where Crown and Māori can sort out their differences without violence and bloodshed. But I believe that if this current bill became law, that role would be removed. It would effectively, legally anyway, take away that role of Te Tiriti, which to me would be super detrimental to this country. The bill, in my opinion, would effectively create two treaties. One, a legal version as defined by the bill, which would not be recognised by the vast majority of Māori and also by a very large portion of the rest of the population, including myself. The other treaty that would exist, Te Tiriti, would be the real treaty as recognised by the vast majority of Māori and by a large portion of the population. That treaty whakapapi in effect to the 1840 document. But this situation of two treaties would lead to a great deal of conflict and mistrust between Crown and Māori, a great deal of mistrust of the Crown. It would also potentially result in an increase in ethnic conflict and racial prejudice. If this bill became law, the Crown would lose the limited credibility it still maintains among Māori. I believe it would present the Crown as a partner to an agreement who would then change that agreement when it no longer suits them. I personally would like to be able to do this with many of the legal agreements that I've made, but I'm unable to. The Crown should also not be able to change an agreement in this way. It would be an act of bad faith, surpassing all the broken promises the Crown has already made to Māori. The idea that in the bill, that the principles of Te Tiriti can be decided by a referendum, I might also point out negates one of the fundamental ideas developed through hundreds of years of liberal democracy. That idea is that democracy is not just about the will of the majority, but it is about the protection of the rights of minorities. A vote by which the majority removed the rights of tangata whenua would not be democratic, it would be the dictatorship of the majority. Finally, I would like to suggest that propagating this bill, which effectively seeks to rewrite Te Tiriti, if it is to be propagated, it should follow the path the Crown followed in 1840. Those who have constructed this bill should take it to Hapu and Iwi and see whether any of them will sign it. If they collect enough signatures, then this bill should be brought to Parliament to undergo debates as it is now. But if, as I suspect, few, if any, agree to sign it, then the bill should be consigned to being a simple nullity and be thrown into the dustbin of history. Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Good. Thank you, Peter. We've got time for a question from Steve Abel.
Kia ora, Peter. Thank you very much, and thank you for your succinct submission. I wonder, Peter, in your years of advocacy for correct representations of history, do you think that it falls upon us as tangata tiriti to really step up and defend the treaty? Because really we are the primary beneficiaries of it. It is indeed the treaty that gives us the legitimate license to be here. Māori don't need any such treaty to affirm their right to be here. So is it a need now at this time in history for tangata tiriti to really make our voices heard in protection and defence of that founding agreement?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, my own views about the treaty are probably slightly different from many people's. My ancestors came here without asking anyone's permission, but to me, the treaty is what gives us the way to be here without violence, without it being a story of conquest and bloodshed. But it is through the treaty that we are able to live here peacefully and to have any sort of legitimacy that's not just by rule of force. To me, the treaty provides us with a place where we can all debate and sort out those relationships. And yes, it is up to Pākehā completely to defend it, because we have effectively benefited from it massively. And it's, I don't see it as being between the Pākehā people and Māori. It is between the Crown and Māori, but it is through it that Pākehā and all other non-Indigenous people are able to live here peacefully and with any and in a potentially convivial relationship with Māori, to whom now we are also closely related through what's happened in history.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Peter. We are out of time now, but thank you for that submission. Very, very useful indeed. Members, our next submitter is Douglas Arorimu McNeill. Kia ora, Douglas. Welcome to the subcommittee of the Justice Select Committee. Thanks for coming on to submit on the Treaty Principles Bill. We've got you for 5 minutes, so I will hand straight over to you. Ka pai.
Ko tautoko hia ngā mihi kua mihia. Ko te peka tētahi o kuna e whanaunga I mate ai I te haukaina. Ngā mate rungi a tātou katoa. E ngā mate haere atu rā. Tēnā koutou. Akatimata. Nā te ringa o te karauna, ngā take o te tiriti o Waitangi I tuhi. Arā, kāre a ngai Māori I tuhi I te tiriti. Ko te tiriti te rao Pākehā te mea tuatahi, nā te ringa o te karauna te rā. Ka tahi ka whakawhiti atu ki te rao Māori, anō nei nā te ringa o te karauna. Ka rongo ngai Māori te tiriti te rao Māori. Anei te io ngā take. Ko te kāwanatanga tō te karauna, ko te tino rangatiratanga tō te Māori. Ko te ture pūmau no atu o te kirimana, o te kāwanata pērā hoki ki te tiriti o Waitangi. Ka puta hea wangawanga, he rangi rua I waingenu I ngā kai kirimana. Ka whakatakoto te whakaretinga ki te taho te hunga kāre I tuhi I ngā kōru. Anei no, ko te kāwanatanga tō te karauna, ko te tino rangatiritanga tō te Māori. Ko taku pātai, ko tēnei pire kua whāriki hia nei mui a tātou. Nā wai I tuhi. Nā te Māori, kāre anō. Nā te karauna te rā. Mai I te wā I haina tia e ngā rangatira Māori te riti o Waitangi, ko mau tonu I a rātou te tino rangatiratanga. Aha ko mā te Aotearoa, aha ko whakahiti raua tēnā ko tēnā o ngā kāwanata, mai rāno. Ko tērā ko tēnei. Kua tīmata te whakahokinga mana ki te tiriti o Waitangi. I tērā I whakatūria ai te tarai piunara o Waitangi. Kātahi ko te pire o te reo Māori. Kātahi ngā whakatanga tiriti me rātu. E hara ēnei whakatanga I te mea pai rawa. Āhua pai noiho. Mō mātou o tapuika, ko te rahi o ngā whakataunga katoa, ko tahi pai hiniti o ngā me ingaro atu. O tira anei ngā kōrero a ngā kuia karaua mā i te Waha o te whakataunga tiriti. Kua whakapāha te karauna mō ngā he nui rawa, mō ngā hara maha, nā tōna ringa. Kua whakaitia e te karauna nō rātou ke te he, nō rātou ke te tinihanga. Kua kimi hamuti, a kua tangihia e rātou. He ngā kaupono i roto i enei whakataunga. Nō reira, hei aha te pūtea, ka murua e mātou ngā hara. Me whakaei ngā whakataunga nei. Ko whakanuia anō tia te tino rangatiratanga o tapuika i roto i aua whakataunga. Au e taukiri e pohara tonu a tapuika. He oi, e tika ana te kōrero, kua whakatūrea anō tia te mana, te whakaute, te maruwehi, kai wainga nui i te karauna me tapuika. Ka haere tunu tēnei pire, ka haere tunu e te atu pire, pēnei. Ka takahi i te mana o ngā whakataunga o mua, kia tupatu katahi, ka whakatūria hekereme ho. Kāti. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora. Thank you, Douglas. Look, our time is up, so we don't have any time for questions, but thank you very much for your words. Much appreciated, and thank you for your submission.
Kia ora.
Members, our next submitter is Amy Tutaki Koringham, and we have her for 3 minutes, and I see, Amy, we have you with us now. Kia ora, welcome to the committee. We've got you for 5 minutes, so in the interest of time, I'll hand straight over to you. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Amy Tutaki ahau, ko rere ahu tuku iwi. I'm here before you today to speak as an individual in strong opposition to this bill. This is deeply personal, shaped by my lived experience as a Māori person, whose people have been fighting for survival and justice for over 180 years. I oppose this bill as it undermines the very principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, principles that were meant to guarantee Māori sovereignty and a genuine partnership with the Crown. As found by the Waitangi Tribunal, the Crown has violated this treaty time and time again through land theft, forced assimilation, and systemic inequities. This bill represents yet another attempt to continue that harm. I grew up in Aotearoa with my Pākehā father in an unstable household, my Māori father being largely absent from my life. I struggled to connect with my whakapapa, my language, and my culture. I felt lost inside. Internalized colonial narratives taught me being Māori meant being aggressive, defiant, and an outsider to society. By age 15, I dropped out of school and turned to substance abuse, searching for something to fill the emptiness. But this was not a personal failure, but a result of a colonial system designed to erase Māori and to deny us our rightful place in the world. I'm not alone in this. Many Māori and Indigenous people globally face the same struggle. This bill threatens to deepen our struggle. The supporters of this bill speak of equality, but what does equality mean when Māori have never been treated equally? Māori have never had a fair share in the systems of power that govern us. Our land was taken, our language suppressed, and our culture dismissed. Pretending that we have reached equality is not fairness. It is upholding the same colonial systems that have always benefited the Crown at the expense of Māori. I've recently returned home after 8 years living and working on Wurundjeri country in Australia. There I witnessed the extensive destruction that colonisation continues to inflict on First Nations communities around the world. This made it clear that colonisation is not just a historical wound, it is a living, breathing force that continues to perpetrate harm against Indigenous peoples today. Aotearoa is known internationally as a world leader in Indigenous rights. Our commitment to Te Tiriti and endorsement of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples have set a global standard. Allowing this bill to pass would be a failure to Indigenous peoples around the world and a violation of our international commitments. The trauma of lost language, land and culture is not something confined to the past. It is ongoing and is still happening in Aotearoa. Māori are tangata whenua, guardians of the land. Ko te awa aho, ko te awa ko au. I am the river and the river is me. Our well-being is inseparable from that of the whenua, the rivers, the mountains. Colonisation sought to sever that bond, but we are still here. Our mana and kaitiakitanga lives on us through our whakapapa. When Māori thrive, Aotearoa thrives. When our language, culture, lands and waters are protected and allowed to flourish, our communities become stronger, more connected and more sustainable. We are not asking for charity. We are seeking the right to heal, to reclaim what was lost and to stand in our mana as kaitiaki once again. Māori need to be empowered to reconnect with te ao Māori, our tikanga, our reo, our whenua, on our terms, not under a system designed for us to fail. This bill seeks to strip away the very tools that we need to heal from the impacts of colonisation and continues to disregard our inherent rights as tangata whenua. I would like to remind this committee of the principles embedded in Whakaputanga, the Declaration of Independence. Our tupuna made it clear that Māori sovereignty, our authority over our lands, resources and people was never ceded, which was affirmed through the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. The passage of this bill will be a direct affront to those principles our tupuna fought to protect, continuing the legacy of colonial harm that Māori have endured for generations. Ka mua, ka muri, walking backwards into the future. Our past is not just a guide, it is the very foundation of our future. This bill seeks to erase that foundation and will allow this coalition government to continue down its current path of destruction. I urge this committee to reject this bill. You have a responsibility to ensure that Māori rights are upheld and protected as promised by the Crown. Our future depends on working together side by side in true partnership. A society built on manaakitanga and kotahitanga, care, unity and mutual respect is the basis for a just and equitable society, creating a better future for us all. Toitu te tiriti, mana motu haki, tino raga teratanga, te hei Māori ora.
Kia ora, Amy. Thank you very much for your submission. We're pretty much at time, don't really have time for questions. But once again, thank you. And I've got your written submission in front of me as well. So thank you for that as well. Kia ora. Members, our next submitter is Kahununu Health Services. And we should have Beverly Tahuia. Kia ora, Beverly. Welcome to the subcommittee of the Justice Select Committee. We've got you with us for 10 minutes. So in the interest of time, I'll hand straight over to you to make your submission. Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora koutou, and thank you for this opportunity. I stand before you today, not just as a public health specialist, not just as a clinician, and not just as the chairperson of Ngāti Kahungunu Health Services, and not just as a woman. I stand before you as a Māori woman, as a Māori mother of future Māori mothers. And I need you to understand what this bill will do, not just in theory, but in the very real lived experiences of Māori women, of Māori mothers, of Māori children yet to be born. This bill tells me that our tamariki will grow up in a country where their rights, their identity, and their place in this world is conditional. That being Māori and Aotearoa will always come with an asterisk, a question mark, and a fight. I have spent my life working in healthcare, in research, and in governance positions, fighting to have our people, to have the care, to have the dignity, to have the futures they deserve. Now I've spent my life fighting for my children to be raised in their language, their whakapapa, and tikanga intact, because I know what it looks like when these things are taken away. I know what it looks like when a mother cannot speak her own language because her own grandmother was beaten out of her. I know what it looks like when the mother fights for her maternity care to be in te ao Māori because her own ways of birthing or mothering are seen as second class. And I know what it looks like when a mother fears that her newborn baby is taken away at birth to be raised at the hands of the state. And that is why I have been thinking about this moment, about how we have been here before, about how Māori are always called to the table, not to lead, but to defend the rights that we already have, to defend the promises that were already made. And yet here we are again, being forced to justify our existence in our own country. They say this bill will never pass. So I ask, what is the point? If not to legislate, then what? To test how far we are pushed? To force us into a fight yet again for what is already agreed? Or is it that just another attempt to re-traumatise us, to remind us that the Crown still believe they hold the pen to our future? You see, being Māori is not an ethnic diversity. It is not a category in forms. It is not something to be debated in courts or in this parliament. But being Māori is our whakapapa, is our whenua, and is our whānau, is our right. In 1840, over 500 rangatira, including 18 wahine rangatira, placed their sign upon Te Tiriti. Each of them carried with them the weight of their hapu, their whakapapa, their future generations. Each of them signed as sovereign leaders, upholding their own tino rangatiratanga. But this bill does not acknowledge that. It does not recognise us, that we are the descendants of those who never gave up their mana. Instead, it tries to rewrite history. It pretends to be about clarity, but it is about control. The government does not get to rewrite the rules of an agreement it has failed to uphold. Māori have survived every attempt to erase, assimilate, and diminish our mana. We are still here. So hear our voices when I say, Māori mothers are not raising their children to bow. We are raising our children to rise. We are raising our children to remember, and we are raising our children to take back what is theirs. Ka whawhai tonu mātou, ake, ake, ake. Kia ora.
Questions? Kia ora, Beverly. Thank you for that. Members, we've got time for questions. If anyone has a question for Beverly, we do have your written submission as well, which is comprehensive. Rawari.
Kia ora, Beverly. Ngā mihi nui kia koe, ngā mihi nui kia kahunga nui Health Services. Thank you for your presentation today. And I heard you make mention of our ability to enact Article 2, which is to be undisturbed of our own traditional practices. And I heard you talk about the birthing and being able to use our own tikanga when it comes to having babies. What this bill, how do you see the treaty principles bill in its own form, hindering our ability to be able to be undisturbed in those particular practices, and to be able to do them safely, as this bill, kind of strips away from the true article, true articles of the Tiriti o Waitangi, Article 2, which is to be undisturbed of that, the right to be able to do that, and has other interventions, powers given to govern, powers to make laws, and all those types of things. Do you see any contradictions or even any threat to our ability to be able to, as they have done in the past, as the laws have done in the past?
Yeah, completely. It's a trust issue, really, isn't it? This bill talks about equality. When it talks about that, it threatens to erase equity. And what we have in the birthing realm, which is something which is tapu in Te Ao Māori, is we have almost erased all of our traditional birthing practices and knowledge around just birthing. We're slowly trying to put pieces back together of a puzzle from I guess I'll say Crown or government that just abolished us through legislation and laws and practices to birthing practices. Just having a practicing certificate means having to go through a Western training program, which doesn't value Te Ao Māori understandings of birth. And so today, what we have today is Māori wahine and babies are overrepresented in every clinical outcome to their detriment. Babies, the most appalling, I could probably say that Māori babies are not resuscitated at the same equity point as non-Māori babies. And so you got to point to a system that was not made for us, we're not thought of in the system. And it just reflects in the inequities, clinical inequities, but also the dissatisfaction of wahine Māori whānau who are experiencing the current maternity services in this country.
Kapai, thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Thank you for your submission and it's really, really useful input. Kia ora. Members, our next submitter is John Peram, who we have for 5 minutes. Waiting for John to... Kia ora, John. You've got your audio.
Thank you very much, Duncan. Thank you, honourable ladies and gentlemen, for this opportunity to comment on this vitally important constitutional matter. I'm approaching 80 years young, a sixth-generation Kiwi with 2 children, 4 grandchildren and 2 greats. For 50 years, I've been researching essential minerals and how they interact and impact to optimise soil, plant, animal and human nutrition, promoting health, well-being and a fully active lifespan. The ACT Party's bill was clearly designed to embed the 3 true meanings, principles of the Treaty of Waitangi into constitutional law, and thus into perfect alignment with our 185 years of societal, constitutionally lived experience as a liberal, multicultural democracy. This already is our as yet unwritten constitution. So yes, we do have a long-standing constitution. This bill simply seeks to enshrine it in law. Therefore, it is beholden on anyone in opposition to this bill, especially those who would dare to promote an alternative but divisive bi-monocultural parliament, to adequately explain just why they would be so worried about the treaty's 3 basic principles, as virtually they remain unchanged in this bill. Our treaty has endured since its signing in 1840 and been instrumental in the making of all the people into one and in creating the most stable and enduring multicultural democracy worldwide. In fact, the best little country, and whose mere 5 million citizens per population generally bat the highest, for example, our medal score in the last Olympic Games. It is unfortunate that for 50 years our Waitangi Tribunal, originally set up to address treaty claims involving legitimate and not so legal land confiscations made during the Maori Wars, has since 1985 been extended to include redress for all and any wrongdoings on the part of the Crown. This naturally, or by design, opened a floodgate of grievances from both traditional and neo-activists, much like what happened over the last-minute flood of Maori claims for all of our seashores and seabeds. The bun fight continued, which only intensifies their quest for special privilege, their flagrant rubbishing of colonialism, and the degradation of the modern Pākehā as unwelcome invaders, all in the efforts by radical Maori to claim sovereignty by 2040, reference He Puapua, the New Zealand government report of 2019. Initially, it was UN interference which led to this report, and the future prospects under He Puapua have likely been a major cause of social tensions, but inflamed by successive governments' reluctance, hence failure to put things right many years ago. Astoundingly, there appears to be little logic supporting evidence from a Maori viewpoint. Many theatrical sideshows, and it is certainly not sufficient that the co-leaders of Te Pāti Māori proffer just 4 points in trying to convince people into their believing their limp statements against, as they made to the Waitangi Tribunal in August 2024 in anticipation of David Seymour's bill. They first asked 2 questions, then followed up with 2 statements. The statements, they said Article 1 gave to Pākehā to govern over themselves, gave consent to Pākehā to govern over themselves. At first glance, and in one sense, this could be said to be true, But alas, it is a further evidence of the way in which the tribunal judges and the law have wastefully persisted in the twisting and the wringing out of the original words of the treaty during their creation of some 300 undefined principles and 100 special and separate rights for Maori, very few of which have any basis in fact. This grand accomplishment made possible only through the use of DDBO, which translates to deliberate deception by omission, as above, in how they conveniently failed to mention that the treaty intention was to bring all the people of New Zealand together as one. Hobson said as much as each chief signed, he iwi tahi tātou, we are all one people. Such confounding over many years has eventually led to Maori leaders to act like spoiled brats, always complaining but never satisfied in their brazen attempts to own the farm. And then the cruncher. Our role as Te Pāti Māori is not to be a part of this system, but to create our own. Tina Rangatiratanga, meaning sovereignty, and self-governance is the ultimate goal. In light of He Pūpū, this might as well have been written as, New Zealand's parliamentary system will soon rightly be our own, and in regaining our right to sovereignty, we will rule exclusively over New Zealand.
John, I'm just going to let you know, you've got about 10 seconds to wrap up.
In conclusion, the longer this bill takes to pass, attempts a shorter fuse. Then a health point of view, be it all on our heads. Democracy for all and all for democracy. Manapuri mo tikata mi tikata mo ti manapuri. Ngā mihi taho. Thank you very, very much.
Ngā mihi, John. Thanks for your submission. We're out of time, so no time for questions. Kia ora.
What a pity. Get well soon, John. Kia ora.
Yeah. All right. We got the New Zealand College of Public Health Medicine next. Sorry, did you have a point, Carl Bates?
Yeah, just a quick point, Chair. If we can ask the staff to promote Suze to a panellist, she's replacing Mark.
I'm sure that they're onto it. They've got a lot going on in the background there, but thanks, Carl. All right, members, we now have the New Zealand College of Public Health Medicine, and I see we've got Colin here. Colin, we've got you for 10 minutes, and Anna has just come online. You'll appreciate time's tight, so I'll hand straight over to you for 10 minutes. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I am here in my city as president of the New Zealand College of Public Health Medicine. I am joined by my colleague, Dr. Anna Stevenson, who is the president-elect of the college. The New Zealand College of Public Health Medicine is the professional body representing the medical specialty of public health medicine in New Zealand. We have more than 260 members, 187 are active. Public health medicine is the branch of medicine that deals with population health of population groups, policy and strategy, health promotion, the control and prevention of disease, and organization of health services. We take our written submission as read, and today we will highlight some key points. We strongly oppose this bill and categorically reject the three principles that it proposes. Te Tiriti is the founding document in Aotearoa, New Zealand, that is fundamental to health and social policy developments for all New Zealanders. We believe that Te Tiriti provides both the impetus and structure for putting in place the measures needed to tackle the stark inequities in health outcomes for Māori. Our opposition to the bill is based on four interrelated grounds. First, this bill is premised on a dubious rationale. treaty principles have already been carefully developed over nearly 5 decades. In short, this bill is proposing a flawed solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Precise problem definition is an essential first step in the practice of medicine, and we do not believe that this bill has adequately defined the problem we are trying to solve. Secondly, the process to develop this bill has deliberately excluded engagement with Māori. This is a clear breach of Te Tiriti, a view shared by officials. Thirdly, the principles that this bill proposes misrepresent and distort key concepts in the articles of Te Tiriti. They trample on the mana of Te Tiriti, discriminate against Māori, abrogate Māori rights, and extinguish Tingo Rangatiratanga. I will now hand over to my colleague, Dr. Stevenson.
Kia ora koutou. Ko kapiti te motu whakaruru ko Waikanai te awa whakaruru no Waikanai o ke o Totahi toko kainga naine e te mana o kai tahu iwi ko Anna Stevenson taku ingoa. I just wanted to speak as our fourth point to what we believe is a false narrative that has been around for a while, but it's certainly got a lot stronger, which is that Maori enjoy some kind of unfair advantage in Aotearoa. And we believe that the opposite of that is the case at the moment. We wanted to present to you a graph, and perhaps you could imagine it in your head. At the bottom on the horizontal axis is time. We only have data going back to 1950. So from 1950 till now, and on the vertical axis is the number of years of life lived. So this is a graph of life expectancy. And in 1950, the gap between Maori and non-Maori was around about 18 years. So you would, I think, have to conclude that something wasn't going the same. There wasn't equality of life expectancy for Maori and non-Maori in 1950. Life expectancy, as I've said, is a composite measure. It's an average that takes into account all of the many things that might lead to a person's death, from the first week and month since they were born all the way through to hopefully at old age. And in 2019, that gap had narrowed from 18 years to around about 7 years between Maori and non-Maori. Still a pretty wide gap, and it's been fairly stable for the last 20 years. So we believe that it's that something is wrong, and certainly in health, Maori are not achieving the same life expectancy as non-Maori, and that is a health equity issue. It is one of the core kaupapa of the New Zealand College of Public Health Medicine that we should be aiming to achieve health equity in this country, and that should be something that is guaranteed to Maori under Te Tiriti. But also, as Steve Abel talked about, Pākehā are the primary beneficiaries of Te Tiriti, and health equity, if that were achieved, this would be good not just for Maori but also for non-Maori. There would be health gains for everybody, there would be economic gains for the whole country, there would be many other wider social and health benefits if we were able to achieve health equity. And I think Amy made the same point just earlier too, where Maori thrive, Aotearoa thrives. Colin.
Thank you, Anna. If this bill is enacted, it would erode the very purpose and status of Te Tiriti in our constitutional arrangement and lead to increased health inequities for Māori. We urge members of this committee to recommend that the bill is not progressed to a second reading in the House. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you.
Tēnā koroa. We do have a little bit of time. If we can keep our questions brief, I'll go to Steve Abel first.
Kia ora, thank you very much for your substantive submission and articulating the inequitable health outcomes from Māori. One thing you mentioned in paragraph 9 was the racism that this narrative encompasses that we're currently undertaking with the bill enables, has likely already caused harm to Māori and has the potential to further increase health inequities. Racism is widely recognised as a major driver of ethnic health inequities nationally and internationally. Can you speak to that harm for us?
Pardon?
The Anna highlighted the differences in life expectancy as the kind of summary statement, but there's plenty of literature in Aotearoa that pretty much speaks to the differences that exist, the inequities that exist, whether that's child health or diabetes or heart disease. Pretty much all of the conditions that have been described show marked differences between Māori and non-Māori. And unconscious bias and racism is a major contributor to those differences. Just this week, we released a paper on the experiences with COVID-19, Māori and Pacifica people, more deaths, more admissions, and pretty much an inadequate national response. We have had in the COVID-19 outbreak, I'm on the record as saying that New Zealand has one of the best responses in the world. Unfortunately, when it comes to Māori, Pacifica and other minority groups, we didn't do so well.
We're tight for time, and Rawi's got
okay, all right.
If we go to you, Rawi, and we'll squeeze it in.
Kia ora, Sir Colin. Whakalofa ia, tēnā anō ki koe e. Just very quickly, I heard you talk about equity as you gave your presentation around health outcomes. Although the treaty principles bill says it's more about equality, and there is a huge difference between equality and equity, where equity is equal outcomes with also not equal resources, but equity means the resources that should equate to the outcomes desired. And you said what is good for Māori be good for everybody. Do you think this particular bill does it achieve the ongoing quarter around what David Seymour was saying is about equal, everybody is equal, and that Māori gets a special type of treatment, or is it the contrary?
Emma?
Well, I think you said it, equity and equality are not the same. And exactly as you said, to achieve health equity, some groups are going to need extra input to achieve health equity. At the moment, with those just on that life expectancy that I talked to you about, somehow we've got to figure out what is the gap, that 7-year gap, what is the need that's required to narrow that gap to make it go away. And equity, I don't see that in the current bill that's being debated at the moment.
Tēnā koe.
Kia ora, thank you.
Tēnā koe rāwiri. Sorry.
Kia ora, Professor, and I thank you both for your contributions and your substantial written submission. It's really useful. So thank you for that. Members, our next submitter is Namaya Trust, and I think we've got Crete and Tamara coming on.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Pēhea te kōrero. Can you hear me?
I can. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you want to just launch it in, that's fine.
Ka pai. Pēhea te kōrero. Me tīmata. Toia mai rā ko te Māori tapu no runga. Koina te whakaritinga o te whakaaro nui I uwhia mai roto anō te hiringa tupua I te hiringa tawhito o te atura I te hiringa atua. I toia mai ngā koha tapu I o waiora, hei manaakitanga kia mātou rā te ira tangata. Kia rangona hei Māori tū, hei Māori oho, ara hei Māori ora. I start with this excerpt from Ngā Tātai Ihorangi for the expressed desire to show you a glimpse of the way Māori view the world. It was written as a reminder to acknowledge that within the Māori worldview sits the answers to health and well-being for all. Kei roto te ao Māori, te oranga. These promises sit within the context of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. They were written in to firm up an agreement between two peoples of this nation, Hiwi Māori and the Crown. We have recently celebrated this historical event at Waitangi recently, and not all were shown the welcome mat. The discourse that was expressed there was met with rhetoric and the abuse of power and privilege, much the same as we have heard today. Today, ngā Maia has come before you to put a po in the ground and say, stop the madness. Do not rewrite history to suit your own needs. Do not assume that a bill such as this will supersede and improve the quality of relationships in Aotearoa. As you can see, it has just achieved the opposite. We oppose this bill and urge Aotearoa to uphold the Articles of Agreement on a Te Tiriti. In our written submission, we discussed the failure of the health system and systems in general to improve the health of our people in Aotearoa. As a midwife within Te Tai Tokerau for 30 plus years, I have witnessed firsthand the demise of Māori health, the inability to address the disproportionately high rates of death and illness among Māori. The recent disestablishment of the Perinatal Maternal Mortality Review Committee, the agency responsible for ensuring accountability in the maternity sector, is yet another nail in the coffin of health. The statistics that have been presented are undeniable, and the recommendations have been ignored. To erase vital oversight mechanisms such as equity data, essential to addressing disparities will only further distance those that have and those that have not. Persistent inequity is unacceptable. In the last 16 years, suicide has been the leading cause of death in pregnancy. 80% of these are Māori and Pacifica mothers. Given the context of the bill and its belief that we are all one with the same income and expenses, the divide will expand and the fallout of this bill will be the whānau and the mokopuna. For too long, Māori birthing whānau have been subjected to the impacts of institutional racism and a system that devalues and undermines what would make the difference. You may ask what these differences are. More Māori midwives, kahu pōkai and akonga, giving care that is culturally appropriate. At present in Aotearoa, we have 300 Māori midwives serving a birthing population of 300,000 whānau. Most of these whānau requiring complex care. The data tells a story. We are a resilient nation who have thrived in spite of the harm. Te Tiriti is a living document. Tataima, it's living, discussed throughout the generations. I've been raised as a descendant of Te Tiriti. I'm just one of many. You saw them at Waitangi. Our tūpuna Kawati was one of the rangatira who added his mark to this historical document. Te Ohaki a Kawati refers to a prophecy by him after the war at Ripeka in the 1800s. It refers to the treaty, our covenant of agreement, and predicted that what is happening today would come to pass. He also predicted that we as a nation need to uphold the covenant, which was made in good faith and understanding. The day will come when you will be like the Pākehā, he said. Do not desecrate the sacred covenant endorsed by your forebears. Look beyond the sea to the transfiguration of the future. We are living the prophecy today. Let us honour the life-giving sanctity of Te Tiriti o Waitangi through the fertility and birth of a nation who chooses to uphold its founding document and its binding promises. Toitu Te Tiriti. Kia ora mai tātou katoa.
Kia ora, thanks. Creek, thank you for your submission. We are pretty much exactly at time, so we don't have time for questions, but we've got your written submission, and yes, thank you for presenting today. So kia ora.
Rite pai. Kia ora mai tātou.
Members, we next have Tiato Aotearoa Charitable Trust. Kia ora, welcome to the subcommittee of this Justice Select Committee. I don't have the names of you here, so if you do want to introduce yourselves, feel free. We've got you for 10 minutes, so I'll hand straight over to you to speak to your submission. Kia ora.
Aotearoa e! Aotearoa e! Ko te wakariki, ko te wakariki. Tukua mai ki a piri, tukua mai ki a tata, kia eke mai ki runga i te paipai pata, ahau mai ka whiti. Tēnā koe Duncan o te rā, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Mariana Verko ahau, ko ahau te tiamana tuarua o te tātou o Aotearoa. Ko aku hoa o te pāri hoki ēnei. This submission is made by Te Tātou o Aotearoa on the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill. Te Tātou is an independent charitable trust working to achieve the sustainable well-being of people, culture and place within Te Aroa. Mai make tū ki tō ngariro. I am here today to highlight the following key points from our submission. Point 1, we strongly oppose the bill. Te Tātou o Aotearoa strongly opposes the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill as it undermines and harms Te Aroa, Māori and the rights of tangata tiriti. Point 2, the bill misrepresents Te Tiriti and Māori sovereignty. Te Tiriti o Waitangi acknowledges that Māori did not cede sovereignty to the Crown. The Waitangi Tribunal's 2014 report, He Whakaputanga me Te Tiriti, confirms Māori retained tino rangatiratanga. Point 3, erosion of Māori Crown partnership and social cohesion. This bill further damages an already fragile Māori Crown relationship. Historical government policies have led to the loss of land and taonga, causing intergenerational trauma for Māori. These injustices manifest in poor health, imprisonment, and alarming suicide rates. Māori continue to face some of the worst wellbeing outcomes compared to Indigenous people globally. The lack of consultation with Māori is a clear breach of Te Tiriti principles. Point 4, false notion of equality over tino rangatiratanga. This bill promotes a homogenized idea of equality that erases Māori rights. It creates the misconception that Māori seek privilege instead of justice and equity. This fuels division, racism, and misrepresentation of Māori aspirations. Fifth and final point, our call to action for this committee: withdraw the bill. This bill represents the most significant modern breach of Te Tiriti. The government must uphold its obligations under He Whakaputanga, Te Tiriti, and international human rights. Te Tātou o Aotearoa calls for the bill to be abandoned in favour of a genuine partnership and the protection of Māori rights. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou. Look, we've got time for questions. Members, Rawari first.
Kia ora koutou, kia ora Te Tātou o Aotearoa. Ka mihinui kia koutou I tēnei rā. Me ngā kōrero ko whāriki hebu I te aroaro o te committee. Thank you for your presentation and for your submission, comprehensive submission. And we know that that Te Aroa have for a long time been able to find balance with the Tiriti o Waitangi, and everybody living here in Aotearoa, and probably we do it better than anybody else around the country in terms of your hospitality and manakitanga. So the expertise that Te Aroa have in regards to true partnership and being able to truly live as a nation, I think is just a mihi kia koutou o Te Aroa. Look, the false notion around equal rights versus justice, I think, is something that really popped out at me in your presentation. And also, I've just mentioned it in the last presentation around equity and equality. And so I just wanted, can you just have just flesh that out for us a little bit more around the kind of false notion around how David Seymour and their party have been pushing equality and that Māori are getting special rights rather than justice for the many years of injustice when it comes to land theft, resources, and also other things that have stripped Māori from those things, which has put us at the top of every bad statistic here in Aotearoa.
Kia ora, Rauri, Jude Pani, taku
Hello, Jude.
Oh, kia ora, therefore. Thank you, Duncan, Mr. Chairman and Committee, for the opportunity for Mariana and Ruku, my board members, to present our submission on behalf of the Te Tiriti partner in this local government partnership arrangement with Rotorua Lakes Council. And Māori, the equity and equality conversation is often presented but completely misunderstood.
Yes.
This equality, it's just, and our previous speaker raised it, Anna, in a really eloquent way around equality and placing a homogenised blanket over this country where it's everybody's individual and you all get the same share of the pie. Well, in a perfect world, that would be wonderful, but we all know that the pie is 90% given to X percent of this country, and the other small piece of the pie is given to Māori and others that don't meet the criteria of equality. So equity for Te Tatau is paramount. It's paramount in the broader conversations in this country around the Māori referendum, around Māori wards, and it's not a one person equal to the next person. It's righting the wrongs of all the injustices as best we can do in 2025. So, yeah, I don't know if Ruku's here from our board and Mariana, but that's just my view of this equity and equality conversation. Tauri.
Thank you, Jude. Ngā mihi.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. If there's no other questions, we'll leave it there. But thank you for a really good submission and a good written submission that we have in front
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and
of us as well. So,
Kia ora.
ngā mihi, thank you very much. Thank you. Members, our next submitter is Chris Hughes, and we have Chris for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Webb and committee members. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. Chris, welcome to the subcommittee. As I said, you may have heard, we've got you for 5 minutes. So without further ado, I'll hand straight over to you. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Dr. Webb. I strongly support this bill and the absolute need for this discussion about the treaty. There were no principles in the original Treaty of Waitangi. The principles have been a construct of Parliament, academics, and the unelected judiciary. The concept of principles in the treaty were introduced into law by the passing of the Treaty of Waitangi Act 1975, but the Act did not define those principles. I would like to advance the thought that this bill is just a first step in a project to grow the unity and wealth of all New Zealanders. New Zealand's economic performance has basically been going backwards as measured by OECD rankings of GDP for the last 50 years. New Zealand is now ranked 33 out of 37 OECD countries and is ranked 54th in the world rankings of the top 60 economies. Our productivity per capita continues to fall. You may well ask, is it a coincidence that this timing follows the passing of the Treaty of Waitangi Act 1975? I would like to advance a theory that we have as a country become too fixated in the past and divided as a people. In other words, we are not all working for a common cause and objective, which is essential for a strong and united team to succeed. Too much money is being directed to non-productive activities. As an example, New Zealand has an entire industry which is focused on a document signed over 185 years ago. On 17 October 1877, Chief Justice Prendergast declared this document a nullity, stating that it had served its purpose of delivery of law and order to New Zealand. Unfortunately, politicians gave this document a new life in 1975. Where is the vision for our future, I ask? I see this bill as a launching pad for the future of New Zealand Inc. Imagine, if you will, that it could be a first step on the pathway to a more prosperous and united New Zealand. If the Treaty Principles Bill is enacted, I believe it will be replaced in future by a written constitution. This constitution should be the foundation on which our leaders can develop a vision for the future of New Zealand, say New Zealand 2040. This vision must see New Zealand as going forward as one people, one country, with a common goal of lifting our unity and prosperity as a nation. A country of which we are very proud as citizens, one which would see our youngest and brightest encouraged to live and work in New Zealand as contributing citizens. Just as importantly, we need leaders who can develop and articulate a vision for our country and take the people with them. Yes, I do support the bill, and would like to thank David Seymour for his thought and courage to promote this Treaty Principles Bill to this present stage. We must have a referendum and let the voters decide and affirm the pledge made by Captain Hobson on 6 February 1840. Iwi tato tateo. We are now one people. Thank you for listening to my submission.
Got it, Chris. Thank you for your submission. We have your written submission as well. We have time for a question if members have one. But if not, that's fine. Also, you'll appreciate we've heard a few submissions and asked a few questions already over the past few days. So thanks for taking the time to make your submission to the subcommittee. Kia ora.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. Cheers.
Thank you. Members, our next submitter is John Porter, who we also have for 5 minutes. So we've got John here, just waiting for him to get promoted. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. John just needs to turn on his video and audio, I think.
Are you there?
Yes, we are, John. Good to have you here. Thanks for coming to this Justice Subcommittee. We've got you for 5 minutes to submit on the Treaty Principles Bill. I'll just hand straight over to you.
Okay, apologise for that mix-up at the start. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to speak and present my submission. Other than on polling day, we as ordinary citizens and taxpayers of this nation do not get to partake in the parliamentary process very often, so I very much appreciate this opportunity. I speak in support of the Treaty Principles Bill. To be a vibrant, successful and democratic country where our grandchildren and great-grandchildren want to raise families, we must be moving forward as one country, as one people. How can we expect to thrive and flourish as a vibrant and successful country when we operate as two separate halves? Especially when one of the halves believes they hold not only a separate status, but an elevated status on the basis of ancestry. How can that be successful? We're a small country comprised of a number of cultures. Culture that can and should live harmoniously. The essence of a democracy is that all citizens are equal under the law. Regardless of social status, wealth, or background, everyone should be treated equally by the legal system. That is a fundamental cornerstone of a democratic society. Do we now not want to live in a democratic society? Democracy's value rests on the core principle of political equality. All members of a political or social community have equal rights to affect decisions made in their name. This simple formula ensures individuals and social groups are treated with dignity and respect and have the necessary autonomy and freedom to flourish. The Treaty Principles Bill confirms that all New Zealanders will have the same rights and duties. What is so wrong with that? Surely that is a benefit to all New Zealanders. I do not believe this bill is about disrespecting Maori or destroying Maori culture. No one wants to destroy Maori culture. To suggest this bill wants to destroy Maori culture is totally erroneous, and its motivation can only be to sow discord. Maori culture is a splendid ingredient of the fabric that makes up what is great about New Zealand. In fact, we should all be celebrating it. But division is fueling resentment. As I stated earlier, equality is a core principle of democracy, and so is majority rule. Majority rule is the most common social choice rule worldwide. Majority rule is a tried, tested, and objective means for organising government and public issues. It is not a path to oppression. Democracies understand that protecting the rights of minorities to maintain cultural identity, social practices, and religious activities is one of their primary tasks. Deciding by numbers is a simple and practical way of handling these differences. In a dictatorship, differences don't matter. Only one person's opinion counts. That's important. In a dictatorship, differences don't matter. Only one person's opinion counts. Accepting diverse ethnic and cultural groups can represent one of the greatest challenges that a democratic government can face. But democracies worldwide recognise that diversity can be an enormous asset. The diverse cultures must be seen as a challenge that can strengthen and enrich democracies, not threaten them. The Treaty Principles Bill does not strip anyone of their rights. We all have a stake and future in this country, but it's hard to not to feel that the majority are being overlooked. Cancelling the will of the majority is a dishonest concept of identity politics.
John, I'm just letting you know you've got about 30 seconds to make some concluding remarks.
Okay, thank you. To have any legitimacy, the introduction or even terminating the Treaty Principles Bill should be approved or abandoned by the majority. Democracy must prevail. Putting this issue to a vote by all New Zealanders by holding a referendum ensures that democracy does prevail. Conversely, in a society, should the will of the minority be imposed without the ratification of other people in that society, then an autocracy is established. I will close by quoting John F. Kennedy in 1962. For a nation that is afraid to let its people judge the truth and falsehood in an open market is a nation that is afraid of its people. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your submission, John. We're right at time, so we'll leave it there. But thank you for making your views known to this parliamentary committee. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Members, the next submitter is Hintia Alexander.
Tēnā koutou,
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koe Hiniatia. We can hear you, but we can't see you, but that's fine.
Hey, hold on, just give me a sec.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to download Zoom today. It was very chaotic.
Well, look, you're our last submitter today, so it's great to have you here. We've got you for 5 minutes, so thanks for coming along to make the submission. I'll hand straight over to you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Hiniatia Alexander aho. I am a 16-year-old living in Aotearoa, and I participate in kaupapa at my marae at Moeraki, and I also participate in Model UN and NZ Model Parliament. And thank you for giving me some time to speak today. I recently made a submission opposing the Treaty Principles Bill because I care deeply about the future of Aotearoa. I wrote my submission alongside 3 generations of my whānau because as a whānau, we care about Te Tiriti and making sure that it is upheld. There are many reasons why I oppose the bill, most of which have been well articulated by the people who have submitted before me today. But one I want to focus on comes from my perspective as a rangatahi who will live with the weight of the decisions today in the future as I become an adult. I have 2 middle names, Jenny and Modi here, and they come from both my taua, a tangata whenua wahine, and my grandma, a tangata Tiriti woman. My whakapapa is my inheritance, and I'm very proud of my rich whakapapa, which is sewn together, along with my lived experience growing up with a diverse community and group of friends. That all ends with me sitting here today. I am not a blank canvas. As my Moeraki whanaunga, Justin Tipper, said in his recent Waitangi Day address to the nation, a nation is not a blank canvas. There is no way to change my whakapapa, and there is no way we can change the history of our country. It's an inheritance. It's our inheritance, all New Zealanders. It's a real place, home to real people living real lives, whose collective experiences have shaped a real and defined history. I've been thinking about the impact of this moment in time and what the inheritance of myself and other rangatahi across Aotearoa will be in the future. And I would like to offer 2 possible scenarios. The first, one where this bill is given more time to set the scene for fear-mongering and division that will ultimately further break down the diverse communities that I am a part of and incite racism where it has luckily not existed in my lifetime. This scenario promotes the idea that if they get something, I will lose something. The reality is, in this situation, we all lose. The second one, without racism, where the people in positions of power have strengthened the role of Te Tiriti in decision-making to ensure a positive and inclusive future for every single person living in Aotearoa. This means our decision-makers need to recognise where people are at and take our many and varied interests to make consider our many and varied interests to make informed decisions underpinned by Te Tiriti. What these scenarios show is that it is racism that will always divide us, not Te Tiriti. I want to thank the Justice Select Committee for giving myself and other rangatahi a voice in this process, as our voice is often missing in democracy. Because I care about the future and young people's voice in it, before my closing remarks, I would like to encourage those in power to look for ways for bringing young people into discussions that are meaningful and the ways that genuinely hear us. As a country, I think we need to consider lowering the voting age to 16 and making sure that at school we are learning what it means and how to go about fully participating in a civil society. But back to the kaupapa at hand. I am Māori and I am Pakeha, and most of all, I am uniquely me. I am a product of Aotearoa, a country with a unique identity founded on a partnership agreement, Te Tiriti. And I have been shaped by my past. I am real, I am in the now, and I will inherit the future. Te Tiriti is in my blood. I live and hope that it will remain firmly so for what's to come next. For that reason, like my whānau and many other New Zealanders today, I strongly oppose this bill.
Kia ora, Hiniata, a fantastic presentation, and if you're the future of Ngāi Tahu and your hapu, then we're in good hands. So thank you very much. I'm sure your mama, who thinks she's not in shot but is sitting behind you, is really proud of you as well. But no, look, that's really, really good. I don't have any questions, and I've read your submission, and it's a beautifully written submission as well. So kia ora for that, and thank you very much. And great to have a young person's voice here to finish up with today. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Members, that was an excellent final submission. It is our final submission for the day, so the committee meeting